You.
Come on in frame. Let's cuddle up.
Snuggles!
Snuggle time. All right. This is the Women's 100 Miler Project podcast. I am your host for this episode, Amy Kling of WHMP Sportz. I'm here with Lee and Karmell to talk about their Cocodona experience.
Oh, no.
All right, do you want to jump right into it?
Instead of the formalities. Hey, Amy, how are you tonight?
I'm great.
Hello, thank you for having us on.
Is she going to ask about post-traumatic stress from the event?
I have a color-coded list of questions. We're not going to talk about the PTSD until the end. We're going to build up to that.
Oh, she's good. She's good.
All right, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to talk about training. You talked a little bit on the group project. I saw a comment saying you were particularly thankful that you had done wobble board exercises. While you were out there, is there any other exercises that you want to give a shout out to?
I mean, I think having done any of earth or strength exercises at all was definitely helpful. 6-minute legs are good. Admittedly,
on that last climb?
Yeah. Oh, the last climb
is
especially.
guys cursed at us because we could still climb.
The last climb especially was fantastic. Nobody passed us on that climb, and we passed like several people. We passed some guys that appeared to be in like their 20s, and they cursed and said like something like, "How the hell are they doing that?" So that felt good.
I feel good, and that's at about mile 240, I think.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much like right around there.
Yeah, we took it easy the day before, kind of because of sleeping off and on.
Yeah, we had a good last day, but like that was part of it. I think that's okay. So yeah, I think all of the strength exercises, but I mean, admittedly, even that I was off my training game in general, so I wasn't doing the strength as much as I could have been. But I do feel like in the last couple of months leading up to Cocodona, I really tried to get back on that, and I do feel thankful that I did that because I think it would have been much more miserable if I hadn't.
Sorry. Lee's getting comfy for anyone who's just listening to audio. So does that training differ from training for 100s?
No.
We did not do anything differently. I mean, in fact, for me, I don't think either of us was totally on the training game this past year, but for me, there was no training. And like what you see on my Strava is what you get. I know we have a few people from our group following me on Strava. Like I'm not doing runs that like aren't on there. They're pretty much all on there. Like my training has been entirely derailed this past year. And what I've fallen back on was the fact that from like the end of 2019 to close to the end of 2020, I trained ridiculously hard for 100 milers. Like ridiculously hard. I mean, I hit, it was basically the plan that we have, but when I say ridiculously hard, I mean that I pushed the hard workouts hard. I did every single day. I was on top of the strength training. I did all that for a year, but then this last year has just been more race stacking to try to keep endurance. So the couple of things that we did do more or less with Cocodona in mind was stacking hundreds. We did 200s in February and
12 days apart.
12 days apart, and we did 200 milers in October as well, which were just about 2 weeks apart. And I do think that was good preparation.
Yeah, it was helpful.
So there's training for 100s, and then the 100s themselves become training for 250.
Yeah, essentially. That's what we did. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but yeah, I mean, I think if you could run 100, you could do 250 miles. The pacing is so different. It's just such a different animal. I don't think that I necessarily would have done anything different. Like even if I was on my training game, it would have still been our project training plan, essentially, that I would have been following to be better prepared for Cocodona. It wouldn't have really been tweaked much for Cocodona.
I would have done much higher training volume if I had the time, but I've been kind of keeping borderline injuries in check.
And that training plan is now on the website, right?
Yep. Right.
And the website's URL is
the Women's 100 Miler Project.com. And then to get to the specific training pages, Well, those are actually secret for a reason.
Oh.
Those are within the group, so since we'll probably release this outside the group.
But
But the
YouTube,
group knows
you
how
can
to
find
get
the
there.
exercises on YouTube.
Yeah, the strength training exercises are accessible to everyone. Those are on the YouTube channel, and everyone could get to those. But
Cool.
For
Yeah, I
now,
would've-
the whole training plan, you got to be a group member to have the access to.
I would have definitely done higher volume, like where we're starting to do some morning jogs.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but
add a
at the
couple
time, I
miles
didn't
in
actually have the health. I have previous injuries, so some of which predate running, but some of which just pandemic, man, or something. But so I'm pretty much healthy again at this point and ready to start training higher volume again. But I definitely lost some speed and some ability to train as much volume as I'd like to for something like a 250. The longer the race, the more you need some volume, or else your body is just not going to be able to withstand the amount of pounding and skin damage. There's only, if you're not doing enough volume, your feet are going to hurt and cramp up. Your skin is not going to be used to being in shoes enough hours a week. It's just, there's only so much you can compensate for with strength. Fortunately, with the strength, none of my joints hurt. I'm still less injured than I was a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, Vernal Equinox beat me up in some ways more than Cocodona did, as far as
Oh, they're just flat running?
Yeah, that flat running at Vernal Equinox, flat and fast for 50 miles actually did more of a number on, like, as far as injury feeling goes, than Cocodona. I don't feel injured at all coming out of Cocodona. I feel sore. Like, we swept the course for Nomis. We did 15 miles. Granted, it was a slow 15 miles, but we did that yesterday, or the day before.
Saturday.
The day before, yeah, Saturday. And that felt just normal sore. And today, shuffling a couple miles down the street, just normal sore, but not like injury stuff. So that's good.
Yeah,
I'm very pleased with that.
Cool. Coming out physically uninjured.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, you mentioned shoes a little. I'm going to use that as a segue to our next topic, which is gear. Who are you wearing?
For shoes.
We're going to talk about everything. But I want to hear about shoes. The big popular thing on the group was the shirts. Everybody wanted to hear about the free fly shirts.
Hey, zero sunburn though. Zero sunburn.
Yeah.
Now we did reapply face sunscreen every day in the morning. We had little Ziploc baggies of it.
Yeah.
And I would reapply it down on my wrists because I kept pushing my sleeves up. We would do legs, but I didn't put sunblock on my upper body otherwise.
Neither did I.
Like belly, shoulders.
The first day I did.
I never put any more on my shoulders and got zero sunburn.
Yeah, same here. So those were
That
phenomenally
claim
well.
of SPF 50 is
Considering
accurate.
how much sun we were in,
Yeah.
holy
It
crap.
was just open
Yeah,
sun.
we weren't wearing t-shirts under those.
Yeah.
We were just wearing those.
Yeah,
loose
so those shirts worked
shirts.
wonderfully, and I don't feel like they made us any warmer than like our thin like.
So those are
running
the
t-shirts.
lightweight
Yeah.
sun hoodies from Free Fly
Yeah.
made out of bamboo.
Yeah,
Yeah, we checked out a few
Those were
other
awesome.
fly fishing style hoodies, and a lot of them are just a little bit heavier.
Yeah.
And these were just felt a little bit lighter and thinner.
So Free
They
Fly
weighed
has a
less.
few of them, so you just chose the lightest
This
one
is
that
the
Free
no.
Fly makes.
This is the one that had no pocket and was SPF 50.
Okay.
There's one that's just a t-shirt, and there's one that has a pocket in it, so there's extra material and no thumb holes. And we wanted just the hoodie
So
with
it's
the
got
full
thumb
coverage.
holes, no pocket.
Hood.
All right. So
And-
let's talk about shorts. You also had some
shorts.
on
Those
that
were the
matched.
what is that brand, like rabbits something?
Yeah.
Is it just
Run Rabbit?
Run Rabbit.
Yeah.
Those are nice too. Like they're a little
just light.
feminine cut for me, so there's that, but they are very thin and light and just breezy, So
They keep things
That-
aired out.
that worked well for that. I actually do like wearing those for racing when it's hot because they definitely they keep.
But we cut the
parts
liners
aired
out of them. We cut the underwear liners out because the underwear liners caused us both trouble
Uh-huh.
by touching too much, and so we cut those liners out. So you can't lie on your back and stretch around people without risk of giving people a free show. Which, whatever, it's ultra running code. But they make the air, everything stays dried off more and cool, and
So that
aired
was
out.
good. And then
which was great till it wasn't.
So your matching shorts worked. Your matching shirts worked. Shoes.
shoes, topos all the way for me. It was like, when I first got into ultra running, it was a long journey to find the right shoe, and pretty much the only thing I'm interested in wearing at this point anymore. It's just topos and various kinds of topos. But this time was the Terra Venture. Now, after Run Love It, where I ended up having to borrow these shoes and they broke open and my toes were popping out and hitting rocks, I decided to have backups this time. So I had 3 pairs of Topo Terra Ventures throughout that break.
Leah, did you go through different pairs of shoes?
Yeah, I had Topo Terra Ventures, which were good, but I started needing more cushion on my feet. That's been having some trouble with one of my feet. Doing exercises for it, but the intrinsic muscle started cramping up. Switched over to some Saucony endorphin speed rolls. Road racing flats, pretty much, but with huge cushion. Well, they're not flat, they're huge cushion road racing shoe. They're super light. They don't traction for shit. So there was some sliding around. I had them on at Nomi's too, because they make my feet really comfy. There was some sliding, because they're just a perfectly smooth bottom. So I wore those for the middle 100 miles, and then I switched into an old pair of Adidas Terex, I want to say, but the old model when they were stiff and heavy. Claws are a little heavy, but they're just protect your foot level. So there was some, because remember when, I don't even know what shoe I was in when we were coming down the road from Mingus Mountain. I think that was the middle shoe. And just run until my feet cramped up so bad I couldn't cope, and then put my forehead on the ground and be with my forehead and my knees on the ground in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
And pass out for a couple minutes and then
I do recall.
And then wake back up confused about my headlamp.
It's a hard
and then
thing to
stand
forget
back up.
when you're running with somebody.
Yeah, I think I hit the ground on my knees like 6 or 7 times in this like 5-mile stretch trying to get back down the road. That was after that we collapsed in the
on
tent.
our well-being, but yes, that
turns.
was Lee's turn to be down for that section right there.
That was the section where I fell asleep walking too, and got super confused by those guys. It was like, "What are you doing? What's going on?"
She fell asleep while she was just doing this little shuffle, so I just kind of grabbed her hand and was steering her around the rocks and figured, like, let her sleep. She needs some sleep, right?
You can sleep, you can sleep hike.
But then she suddenly woke up and was like, "What's happening?" And I'm like, "I got you." And she's like, "Where'd they come from?" It's like, "They just passed us."
You had one of those episodes. That was when you saw the soldier fort that wasn't the soldier fort.
Oh, yeah, like I was falling asleep while
we
walking
took turns.
too, yeah.
It's not the soldier
fort. I feel
fort.
like I've seen Lee in similar states, and I don't know if it's the best strategy, but I always try and just like, I'm going to give her some points. I'm like, you're in a cot, Karmell's in the other room, we're all in a cabin together. Just give her some touch points and like, don't try and fuck with her too much. Don't give her too much to process.
Oh yeah, I did wake up confused.
Oh, that was no means.
Yeah, because I fell asleep on the cot.
Yeah. I was like, that's not her bed. She's gonna be confused when she wakes up. So there was more gear that you had on. You had on you had on your vest, which matched, and you also had matching belts.
Ultimate Direction.
Yes.
And so you're wearing an Ultimate Direction vest, and you were wearing.
I've been wearing their vests forever because I love it. I love their vests.
Now,
they do not sponsor
but
me.
you had an Ultimate Direction belt on as well,
right? And
did you go with the belt, an Ultimate Direction belt? Okay,
and it was
that's how I was raised.
Like we knew that this was going to be like this whole matching thing, which it wasn't because we wanted to match, but it was just because that was the gear that was good. And even with the packs, I ordered multiple packs. And, like, that was the one that was the obvious winner. So it's like, what are we going to do? One of us not go with the obvious winner because we don't want to match? So we understood that we were going to go.
Only come in one color.
That we were going to go into this being total dorks. But I wasn't going to wear a belt. And then, like,
there's nowhere to put the extra liter of water.
All the chaos in my life and procrastinations and things, we hadn't tested out the packs, which is one thing we should have done during training, is those packs should have been filled up with all that freaking water, and we should have been out running with packs with all that weight.
In February.
Well, yes, there's lots of things I should have gone differently as far as that goes.
We don't have to.
But we hadn't even tried that until like a few days before we were leaving. She filled up like a bladder and then my 2 front things, which I don't even run with front waters ever, but I was going to have to for this. So I had the front waters, and then she put a bladder back there, and I'm like, I feel like I'm giving one of my kids a piggyback ride. Like, this is way too much water to be carrying in my pack. I'm going to have to wear a belt. I'm going to have to put some of it like I have to distribute it differently.
I had
Otherwise,
already
my
planned
back's
on
going to be
distributing
done.
this way.
So at the last minute, so I'm like, let me try your belt. And I tried it, and I was like, this feels good. Well, now I can't get a different belt because this is the belt I tried. So at the last minute, I had to order the same belt as her because it was like, well,
It's
this
also
works.
it's really a pretty good
Oh,
one.
and I
'cause
did
it
my
sets the
little
water
jog
low.
around the living room, and I'm like,
No,
okay, yeah,
This will be fine. I had to jog
Yeah.
around the living room.
Yeah, so
250
then we
400
knew
more
that it
miles.
was going to be like about like.
Well,
it
most
was-
belts
it was-
set the
it was
water
gonna be
higher.
as nerdy as it could get as far as the matching goes.
So
It was
That
everything.
actually puts the weight of the water a little bit lower down on your butt,
Yeah.
so that it really is on your hips. A lot of them actually sit it up high enough in your low back. I think it's different for men than women, but for women, a lot of the belts, if the water bottle's straight across, which is what happens with her, the water is sitting above one of her scoliosis points because her back does the S curve, so the water ends up sitting above a spot where her back's uneven, and so it puts weight down on that curve, and it's horrible. This puts water in 2 bottles so low down on your hip bones
So it's actually on your hip
that it's
bones.
actually weighting your hip bones, so it does
Like a
not pull your
backpacking
spine
bag.
out of whack. Yeah, it doesn't pull your spine out of whack, and just the way the bottles fit, it doesn't jounce around and pull your spine out of whack, which is so if it's somebody that has like low back trouble, and for me that's what I liked about it, although I can wear because mine's pretty lined up. But where you have disc trouble in your low back, definitely that UD belt with the 2 bottles, it sits it pretty low down.
So I saw you guys at Walnut Canyon. That's about mile 229, and at that point you ditched the belt pouch. You're like, this is annoying. I'm getting rid of the belt pouch.
Oh, the front
Yeah.
pocket.
Yeah, the front pocket on about.
so annoying.
It was super annoying to you. Apparently, you still kept it through 229 miles, but just the last 21 miles, that was gone. It was
It's
like,
a-
It's
that
a hand,
point
it's
where
a
we're
hand
good.
coordination issue. And as you get, I don't know if you know this, as you become tired and wander around the desert, your hands swell and your coordination declines, and your frustration threshold actually declines. And so I think by that point we were like 4 days and about 5 hours of sleep into our adventure. And so there was
Well, I mean,
decline
that
in
thing was annoying
coordination.
from the beginning, but it just got more annoying as time went on. And then I was like, but then I also got to the point too that I really couldn't do many more gels. So I unloaded some of the gels. Like I didn't have room for what I had mostly in my pouch was my like emergency, like salt, Toms, like Tylenol, like that kind of stuff, easy access, and like caffeine, my caffeinated gels. So there wasn't room in my vest really for that stuff, but when I decided that I couldn't really handle the gels anymore, I was able to unload some of that and make room so that I could get rid of the pouch. Because, yeah, that pouch that was frustrating.
was there any other gear that you ended up hating or even momentarily being mad at?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't like the front waters, but that was the only way to do it. So I do feel like I kind of got used to it. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it's not like you'd hate it if you were running fast, but
the gels, I mean, that was a huge learning experience, and
The
I'm
mouth
glad
ulcers.
that, we got, me especially, I got horrible mouth ulcers. One in particular, just like a giant white thing at the tip of my
it's
tongue.
gross.
From too many gels, and I guess how acidic they were, and like our mouths being dry and all of that. And it just got to the point that like it wasn't just that I didn't want them. Like
It
I
hurt.
definitely didn't want
No, you
them,
didn't
but I
get
could
hurt.
force feed myself. It was that my whole mouth just stung if I put them in. So it got to the point that I was like, I'm not
Because we both like the
doing
citrus
that
ones
anymore.
because they're
Yeah.
tangy.
And then it really sucks to be like in pain in all sorts of ways, and then also have like the inside of your mouth like burning, like this thing that you wouldn't think would be hurting while you're running. Like all the other things I'm used to hurting while running, but this was like, in addition to that, we're just gonna give you giant blisters on your tongue so that you could deal with those too while you're.
Yeah, we both. She had a much
sleep-deprived
worse
and
one on the one side, but we both had blisters.
highly
So
unpleasant.
the trouble is we both like the lemonade gels and like the different things that are so definitely you can only do so much citrus.
We had
citrus.
too many.
I don't, but it's never affected me in 100, or if it has, it hasn't until
Right.
the last 10 miles, and who cares at that point? Like if you can get in a couple more, you can finish. But that was, what we did do that was good though. You had that one blister we named, but overall our feet came out of it.
Oh, my favorite. I mean, yeah, I had those two blisters
the
that
sock
I was
and
more
foot
showing
pits
to the
worked.
camera for fun because they were like,
They were
big and
ridiculous.
poofy looking, but they did not hurt until after I popped them, and I didn't pop them till after the race. Now, I was worried they'd pop during the race, but they held up. So our feet, compared to other people's feet,
Yeah.
I saw other
Awesome.
people's feet. I saw your feet. Your feet looked fine.
Yeah, so we baby wiped.
Notwithstanding
baby-
Pinky and Reginald.
Every single drop bag, we baby wiped everything spotless clean, let it dry, reapplied, and not just like a little lube, but like all the way around the foot, clear up to the ankle.
With the foot care
Re-lube
kits
everything
that are
and
on
then
YouTube,
put the
the
sock
foot care
on.
kits
And
at
those
every
were-
drop bag.
Every drop bag had a foot care kit.
Yeah, although
Okay,
I didn't
cool, 'cause
alcohol. I
We've
didn't
talked a
alcohol
little
my feet.
already about the next two questions were what did you carry and what was in your drop bag. So
Yeah, I didn't alcohol my
yeah.
feet. For the most part, because they were staying dry. Desert's so dry.
Yeah,
there was no waterlog.
kind of
Yeah.
But wet wiped every bit of dust and dirt, cleaned between every toe, every
because
time.
the alcohol is to pull the water out of your feet, so that did become kind of unnecessary. But wiping the dust
Baby
completely
wipes.
off, I'm telling you, we saw people with absolutely destroyed feet out there,
Yeah.
and we're talking at like 150
Brand socks.
miles. Like you got 100 miles left. Our feet held up phenomenally well,
Yeah.
and I totally attribute it to that.
And we
the
were
foot care kits
also-
and being on top of that and taking the time to change socks and everything.
for all that, at least for me, that I developed some other minor chafing issues exactly along the bikini line crease. I did actually wet wipe that like every time and reapply. I have some new
Yeah.
solutions to apply to that. There'll be updates over summer.
Right. So yeah, drop bag.
Right.
To answer your question, every drop bag had baby wipes in there, and we'd sweep them out. We'd take baby wipes with us
Yeah.
for various purposes, and part of them being that you are out in the desert with no facilities and such. So don't know when you might need those.
Well, we were also baby wiping our faces.
But yeah, baby
this is the
wiping
least
your
breakout I've had
faces.
in a hot race. Like usually I get acne right along here after hot hundreds. Every time that we'd clean the feet, we'd also take a baby wipe and clean the face. And every time,
Feel good.
every
Face and
time the
then
sun, like when the sun came out,
There's
like
same wipe. Face,
same
same feet.
face. What? No, I think
no,
we did
no,
multiple
this is
Oh,
a
multiple
many
wipes, yeah.
baby wipe
Okay.
process.
Yeah, we did multiple wipes.
And then no, and you're gonna put on sunblock on your face. You have to baby wipe your hands and face thoroughly.
If
and
you
then
were
put
going to
the new
use the
sunblock
same
on.
wipe, then I would recommend face.
Yeah,
Probably.
face, feet,
Probably
then
that.
anything else.
Probably that.
I don't want what's
Um,
on my feet on my anything else.
But yeah, then we had,
Oh.
of course,
Oh,
the,
that's a hard
the
choice.
fuel, which really now we know needs to be, it needs to be more variety. It needs to be more than just gels. It needs to have stuff that's not acidic, because we have I don't know if we mentioned this, but we have Swiss Peaks 360K in September, and that was part of the reason we actually wanted to do Cocodona, was to work out the kinks of that kind of distance. And Swiss Peaks is, I think, more important. I think I speak for both of us. Far more
Yeah.
important. So this was a good time to
This was a training run.
to work out the kinks,
This is a good
and
training run.
Swiss Peaks, we want to just be an awesome experience all around. So I'm glad that we learned that about the gels, because I don't know that.
Well,
I
then we ate fewer
thought
of the
that would
Lenny
happen.
layers than we should have.
I thought we'd get sick of some of them, but yeah.
I
so
actually no.
more
I
variety.
actually think we pushed a little harder than we should have in the first 24 hours, and therefore weren't eating quite as much solids as we could have.
Yeah.
And therefore, once you get off of it, it's hard to get back on it. But also, we got to figure out. I don't know. We're gonna have to look at some other like pro bars or something. I know they're
Right,
dry,
yeah,
but we're
the
gonna have to
pro
get
bars-
some more food-like things.
That was my concern, is that they're dry, but we do definitely
Lenny
have
layers
to
are too
get
sweet.
more food-like things.
We'll
and
have
with the
lots of
Swiss
water.
Alps, it's a lot of that going slow up the mountain. Like you're
Yeah.
not running up
Well,
the
and we're
mountain.
thinking it's dry
87, like
dehydration.
87,000 feet of elevation gain,
But
or
we
something
got to
crazy
just
like
it's
that.
87,000 feet. We got to
So-
actually just sit and drink water with the dry thing and get hydrated. Like we're gonna have to actually just eat. And we definitely learned the value of
But
that.
before jumping topics, drop bags. I wanted to finish.
What else was in
did
yours?
we have in the drop bags? I don't think really. I don't think much else.
Batteries.
Oh, batteries.
Batteries.
Yeah, batteries. Definitely
You don't want to run on
batteries.
batteries. We never did.
For the headlamps. That's what the batteries.
And then not at every drop bag, but because we carried enough of the salt and Tums and everything.
I had
we
a
had the
friction
occasional
stick for
refill
relubing. I had friction stick
of
for
that.
relubing.
Oh, yep.
And then we had
Yeah.
some Boudreaux's butt paste, which it helped keep things in check, but I have some thoughts. I mean, we both got through
And
it.
then,
It took 2 days to get the bikini line issues, and that's definitely just hair follicles getting irritated and stuff. And
we did have some emergency layers in our drop bag, but
Yeah.
for the most part, we carried the important layer, I should say, like
a
on us,
base layer, a rain
on
jacket,
us
and
the whole
tights.
time, just because the pace was so unpredictable at this distance for
Yeah.
us. And I think that was a good idea. I don't think we could have really anticipated when we would want that.
You'd have to
layer.
have crew.
So
you'd
I
have to have
was-
crew driving you layers, or you'd have to have huge drop bags and have
Yeah.
like 8 of everything.
Yeah, so it was good to have that on us, just not knowing completely what the pace was going to be like for something like that.
You talked a little bit about fueling being different from 100. It's more solid foods, real foods for this.
Right, and
we tried the potatoes, and they started. First, we ate them too fast, and then that turned us off to them. And then we got back on them later on, but it took a while. It's hard. Like if you mess up with a food and you don't slow down and take your time with it, then you don't want the food because you didn't feel good. So I think the potatoes are still going to be something that gets involved, but in smaller serving sizes.
Smaller serving sizes.
Smaller portion. But I do think we could have actually made ourselves eat more of them had we been better about it earlier. And that's the thing. Like it's so hard because you don't know how to push. You don't know how much to push. You don't know. It's hard. I mean, anybody doing their first 50K isn't sure how much to hold back early.
And
it's the same thing, but on this huge scope.
You hadn't done the potatoes in a 100 either.
No.
Right?
No.
You've only done them in training runs?
I don't even...
Did you even do them in training runs?
I tried them once.
I mean, I tried them on your couch, but I don't think we... So a
training run isn't really a test. I mean, that's one of the difficulties, and that's why people are like, well, test it on your training run. Okay, but there are a number of problems that do not occur for me until after mile 70.
Right. So
sometimes between 70 and 80, there's problems. That's not a training run distance. So around
well, 70 or 80, I think that's when you posted on Facebook that you guys had stomach issues. Which brings us to our next topic about things that happen in races.
What stomach issues?
You posted
the ones you posted on Facebook.
That was after. Okay, so I recall this.
You said there
after the first day. So first off, I do think that we
forgot.
I do think that we pushed the first day a little hard, which it was really. I felt like we were holding back, and
so
for
did
100 we were essentially. But one of the things that happened is that we didn't realize it had been hot, but like a little breezy, and it's dry heat, right? So you're not like sweating like you are here. And we got behind on salt. That was
intellectually,
and we knew it.
You are sweating; it's just evaporating like sweat is
well,
supposed to.
Right.
And we were putting in more salt than usual and putting in more water than usual.
Right.
It's how much more.
So we didn't realize, and we actually
mile 8 gaps.
Started to gather that was the case before we were feeling very badly. Night hit, and we were like a little shivery, but then we both started peeing a lot, and it was clear, and we were both kind of like, oh, maybe we didn't put in
bodies are putting water out, and we're too shivery
as we thought. But the temperature was starting to drop a lot, and there were relatively big gaps between aid stations. And when I say that, I'm comparing it to 100 milers, because I know when you interviewed Rebecca Walker, for example, she was like, oh, the aid stations were so close together. I'm like, they were like 15, 16 miles apart. I'm like, for a 100 miler, those are long gaps.
Well, no, but early, they were closer really early.
Yes, and that's something that Rebecca mentioned.
She was on course early when they were close. Yeah. They were only just starting to gap out when they left the course.
Well, so we still had a ways to go to get to this aid station, and we finally get there, and it was just, the seats that there were all taken. There was only one tiny little heater, and I don't think there was any kind of tent, like not even an open air one. So they had this like tiny little heater kind of aimed at these 4 seats, totally out in the open. So we were so cold at the aid station that that was the time where we
needed
leading
to sleep.
up to that aid station, not necessarily sleep, but take care of ourselves and do some
sleep probably
some maintenance. Sleep would have not been a bad idea.
At least,
but
lie
definitely
down and
do some maintenance. But it was one of those things where it's hard to do the maintenance you need to do when you're standing there shivering. You either have to go or it's like
they had nowhere to get warm at all.
So there was no way to get warm. Like I said, the seats were taken, and even if you could sit
most
them
people were in their crew vehicles, so most people can get warm because most people do.
And I don't even think that specific spot had crew, if I recall. But we decided at that point, okay, let's push on. We'll push on to the next. We'll push on to the next aid station, which again is like I don't remember. It was 10 to 15 miles. I don't remember. I'd have to look at the chart to know exactly. But it's during that gap that I think we started to tank pretty badly, because we had started to notice things going wrong, got to the aid station, didn't take care of ourselves because we were uncomfortable, pressed on, and so it was by the time that we got to the next aid station that things had really gone south, and there were stomach issues.
Layers. It was just cold.
For both of us involved in that, and it was hard to get things down at that point. We were behind in the salt, and obviously when you're behind in the salt, then it's hard to take things in, so it's kind of like a step-by-step process of like, you gotta get this right before you do this, before you do that, and it was like things did start to get behind. And it was and that first night that things kind of went from like feeling very optimistic to feeling south. But by the time we got to Whiskey Row, which I think was like
That was where we got to
60
next.
something miles, we were absolutely exhausted. And then we got there, and it was the same thing. Like, it didn't appear like it appeared like the seats that were there were crew seats, like that people had brought them, and it was like it was a weird experience. It was very different.
They had a table up where you came into the courtyard, and all of the volunteers who weren't someone else's crew, who's, in my experience, 100 milers, often those are the people that you can ask for help if you don't have a crew, were behind a table up by the entrance, and they stayed there. Like, even if you were like, oh, I need help to get my drop bag. Oh, well, drop bags are in the back of the courtyard. They would just point, and you're looking like, I don't see them. Well, they're in the back. Okay, so then we walked to the back of the courtyard and found our drop bags. Then we walked. There was nowhere to sit there. The drop bags are just in the dirt. But the whole courtyard is dirt if you can't get a chair.
It's dirt
or
and
these
gravel.
benches.
Like, it's not just dirt, it's gravel. So we ended up, like, sitting in the gravel.
Like, there's
like-
no tarp, there's nowhere
So
else
I
to
saw
go.
that. I wasn't at that aid station at the same time as you guys, but I did see that one. It wasn't a cozy park. It was
No.
like it
Well,
was.
nothing is because there's
Yeah.
no grass because
But
Arizona.
then even Lee said something
there's nothing
to
there,
like
but
a
there's no tarp to
volunteer,
sit
like
on.
she said something to a volunteer, kind of trying to be nice, but kind of trying to hint, like
Hey, is there
she
somewhere we
would,
could
yeah, she was kind of like it'd be nice to sit or lay down, like we're really tired. And it turns out there was a sleep station right there inside the hotel.
just couldn't see the
He
sign.
didn't even mention it. He was
No.
like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he walked away. Like, he didn't say, "Oh, there's a sleep station in there." Like, which
I don't know if he didn't
And
know
that,
or
like,
what.
you know,
that would
and
have been a big difference for you guys to have.
Well,
like,
no,
a sleep station
so
at
someone
Mile
else's
16.
crew, some ladies who were waiting on their runner were like, "Are you guys okay?" We're like, "Whoa, I mean, we're not dying or anything. It's pretty early, but we're just really tired and we kind of need to lie down." She goes, "Oh, see that sign there? See that door? You can go in there and lie down. There's
yeah,
cots
and
in
they
there."
they gave us seats first. They got us food.
And this is somebody else's crew.
This is
Yeah,
somebody else's
Nails
crew.
Cross.
This isn't
You can get
volunteers.
pizza back there.
This
They have
is-
food here,
This
but
is
the aid
somebody
station
else's
table
crew
doesn't
who
have
started
food.
being like, "Hey, our runners aren't here. We're happy to help."
Nice.
They gave us like a blanket.
Yeah.
They like sit in these chairs. They let us sit in their folding chairs. They ultimately were like, "Oh yeah, take the blanket into the sleep station."
Yeah.
But it was just such a weird experience. Like, I am so grateful for volunteers anyway, but it was just a different experience than what I'm used to with the hundreds and what Lee has said that she's used to.
Yeah.
And to, you know, Lee's finished 4800s and I finished 9. Like, we're not coming from a place of inexperience. So I think we
odd.
just experienced that a lot throughout Cocodona, where it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, wow, this isn't what we're used to coming into aid stations.
I don't know if
Yeah.
they just expected everyone had crew. Maybe like a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
there was
I
volunteers
mean,
most
that's
didn't
something
realize.
someone else asked online too. Is did you have crew? And I wanted to answer that and emphasize no, they did not have crew.
No.
What you saw is what they got in terms of my videos out there. WHMP Sportz was not there to support them at all. Like, I don't know, like morally maybe, but like I was there to ask stupid questions and put them on YouTube and not help at all, and which is what I did.
Well, I've been at multiple hundreds that actually mark your bib and Sharpie. My friend Ryan just reminded me of this because he just ran Massanutten this weekend. One lunatic person ran Cocodona and Massanutten. Rhoda.
That's nuts.
That's well, she's an extremely tough individual and finished. I think she actually won Massanutten. So, but they put a red S on your bib if you do not have crew or pacers with you. So the volunteers know,
Start
not
there.
because anyone deserves extra, but because actually, yeah, if you're coming
a good
in and
idea.
you have 5 people about to just wait on you and pit stop you versus you're completely alone, they want to know so that if you look not okay, they're like, hey, you look not okay, and we know you don't have anyone, so come over here and we're just going to
Yeah.
make sure before you wander off into the night.
Because crew isn't just like your buddy meeting you at and saying hi at an aid station. Like the crew would get there early. They'd set up, like you guys mentioned, like chairs. They'd have a sleep station in the vehicle, either be an RV or
Yeah.
something.
Even in the back of a
Yeah, a
Subaru,
lot of
you
them
can.
had big RVs. Then there were Sprinter vans, and then Subarus
Yeah,
were like the
there's-
next down.
I
But a
think
lot of them
Toyota
had RVs and
4Runners.
Sprinter vans
Yeah.
and stuff.
The Toyota 4Runner, I think.
Saw a lot of those.
Say,
But those are just the ones I admired most. I was like, if I was going to crew you guys, I think I'd want a Toyota 4Runner with like beds for you guys in the back and stuff. And and after driving like a rental Encore on some of the off-roading
yeah.
it took to get to you guys, I think.
That would have been a different,
It would've been a
whole
different-
different experience.
It's something
Well, yeah.
that you guys didn't want crew.
Yeah.
It would have been
No,
different.
we
It
don't.
wouldn't have been
We
my
don't. We
vacation.
don't do
Like,
crew.
We're still
We don't
proud of
do
ourselves
crew.
for
Yeah.
doing
Oh, yeah. No.
Yeah, oh,
yeah,
you should be
yeah,
hella-
I-
It was
hella
just
proud of
I am-
yourselves for doing stuff solo. Yeah.
it just was different than what I
it
expected.
was very
from the
different, and
descriptions of the
it
company.
it made it so much harder, which we'll get into more. But yeah, that first day it was like you still had the adrenaline of the race, and we were
Oh,
going
yeah.
through some like kind of like woods. It was actually like a nice area. Day 2 after we left Whiskey Row was very difficult. It was not a pretty course that day. I don't think people
Dells is
realize. I
amazing,
mean, you see these pictures, and they make up such a small portion of the course. Everybody's like, "Oh, it looks like such a beautiful course, such a fun course."
It's beautiful. It's
That
beautiful.
was not my experience of the course. There were some incredible, beautiful views, but they were few and far between. And day 2 was a lot of time going through like fields, like dried up fields with the sun just beating down on you and just dirt
And by now, though,
gravel.
your stomach issues were taken care of.
The stomach issues were better, but at this point we're getting very tired, and I think
now
that,
it's just sleep
I think
deprivation.
day 2 is when we started to kind of realize the differential, like between the crude and the uncrude, and that this is kind of a stage race in disguise.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. Like I think day 2 was when that really started to settle in, where you started to realize that like these people are like sleeping in their RVs and getting all cozy, and like we're having trouble getting like
there
the
are other
maintenance we
solo runners,
need,
though.
and we're having trouble finding anywhere to like lay down. So day 2 at Whiskey Row, we only got like a 20-minute nap.
Is day 2 when I slept on the sidewalk for about 10 minutes?
I think
In the sun in front of the aid station?
I think that did happen on day 2. We ran out
You
of
have to
water.
excuse us. Our sense of
Yeah,
days
yeah,
is off.
it is. It's hard to. It's hard to. The sense of days is definitely off, but we ran out of water. And again, we got to an aid station. It's
you
like
carry 2
you're just
liters, it's
waiting
just
for
gas.
that aid station to be your salvation, and we got there and there was nowhere to sit again and like nowhere to cool down. So we both just laid down on the sidewalk. Like we were just like like people were like again though no volunteers were like, oh my god, are you okay, which is like more what I'd be used to in 100. Sometimes it's almost annoying. You're like, I'm fine. It was like other people's crew that were like, are you okay? And like we're okay.
Well, not
We're
there,
okay.
because that was uncrewed. The sidewalk one, I think, was that was
No,
uncrewed.
that was crude. That was crude.
was? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember because it's
It's
there's
all
2
blurred,
that
but-
are blended for me.
So day 2 was very difficult, and then I think it was the next morning that we got to Jerome. And getting to Jerome and Jessica Vandenbush's aid station, I felt like that was like the first aid station that felt like an aid station.
Never seen you that
for
happy
me.
eating
Oh yeah,
sausage.
like if you look back at your video, I was cracking up like watching the video while you're interviewing because I'm just like,
Yeah, so
like in the background, I'm just like stuffing my face.
So that was one of those things I like woke up and looked at the tracker and was like, oh, Jerome's a half-hour drive away from my campsite, and they look like they're probably about a half hour out of Jerome, so I'm gonna just not get out of my pajamas and go and do an ambush interview. And I pulled into the aid station as you guys were walking up, and I could tell
remember
from
that.
the car, I looked over and I see you guys walking up, and you just like, Lee's just got this angry look on her face, like I'm not having a good time. And but then we got
We were
got
good, though.
Yeah,
We were good.
yeah. Parked the car, walked to the aid station with you, and once we got to the aid station, there's Jess Vandenbush serving up
Oh, yeah.
homemade donuts and vegan.
Oh, yeah.
cinnamon.
Sausage.
Yeah, so it was like an
Sausages.
emotional boost because we got to see friends, you know, and then but the aid station rocked, and then like of course you guys like set
We
up
got to nap
a little
briefly.
like sleeping area
On grass.
for us, like where we got to
Oh,
nap.
so nice.
And so that was a much
Not a
much
prick of
needed
bush.
boost kind of, and I think that was just after 100 miles, if I'm
Yeah,
not
I
mistaken.
think so. That's area.
So that was really good timing for that because we were able to leave there with like just feeling a little better for sure.
So what was your sleep strategy going in?
I think our
What
sleep strategy was not good.
Yeah,
I think our sleep strategy was going to be to delay sleep as long as humanly possible, and I don't think that was the best route to go. And I think seeing the other people who were coming out of their RVs and stuff, they definitely had more push than us. So I think going into Swiss Peaks, where we know there's going to be good sleep stations and such, like I think we will try to nap a little bit more, a little bit earlier on, rather than waiting until like total crash. Like
Yeah, do you think in a longer term thing like sleep is like salt? Don't fall behind on it.
yeah, I think so. I think we got really behind on it, and it crushed
Well,
us.
and you think you won't be able to fall asleep. You might not, but even just deciding to lie flat for 20 minutes and not move has restorative value. Also, interestingly, you're sure that you're wide awake until you're waking up again 20 minutes later because you weren't wide awake. So that happens too. And that definitely happened where I thought that I wasn't sleeping. But then I realized that the last things in my brain were not what was happening around me. I was having dreams. So definitely it's worth lying down and trying to sleep, and it's amazing how much 5 or 10 minutes does even. But definitely with heated indoors to go into, at Swiss Peaks it's every 30 to 35 miles, you hit the life bases. And since they have one drop bag that follows you, you can have a sack to sleep in.
Yeah.
The solution at Cocodona is get your Mylar out, which they get damaged. And we did use them, but that's your blanket.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sleeping bags.
Well,
that you leave
so that would be impractical if you're
Yeah.
traveling to the race. Some people kept like some sort of sleeping bag or bivvy on them the whole time.
Yeah, we did see
but
that. There was a
they're
guy that
kinda-
had a 30-pound pack.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to be carrying if you're hoping
but
for
it's another solution.
but some people just want to go and hike, and that's their thing. So there's no harm in
we
carrying
would've
that
done
kind
well
of
doing.
weight if that's what you're doing. And I mean, admittedly, I do have to say, we didn't look much into the sleeping stations in the runner's guide. I'm guessing there's information on them in there. I kind of thought that the aid stations are just going to be how I'm used to them being, and I thought, if we need sleep, I'll just sit in a chair by the heater and fall asleep for a little bit.
That's usually how I sleep in hundreds.
I just kind of pictured it more like 100-miler aid stations where I've been able to do that, or where they're very accommodating about that sort of thing. So that's on us. We didn't look more into that. We didn't look to see if they have blankets available or anything. And they don't. They don't have any kind of blanket or anything. So you have to figure you're low on calories. I mean, that sounds dramatic. We're ultra runners, right? So people are going to be like, oh, we're ultra runners. You're being a sissy. But you're tanked on calories. So if you lay down, you start shivering right away. And
So
you
you
don't,
wake back
like
up.
all you have is your Mylar blanket is an option that it doesn't keep you warm, so you can't sleep in it. At that point, it's just better when you're that cold and that uncomfortable. We would just get frustrated and just be like, let's go.
Well, you had your pants
we're not sleeping. Yeah, like and my stuff, when I got cold and started shivering, my things would cramp up really, really bad. Sedona, the sleep station, was inside a church, and they had the heat cranked up to like a temperature that would be uncomfortable any other time. But when I got there, I was like, yes.
Finally
And
warm.
I think that was probably the best sleep that we got in the longest during the entire race was in the Sedona. The Sedona church there would just, like I said, like most people would be like, if you walked in there, you'd be like, what the hell? It's too hot to sleep. But for us being so low on calories and coming in at night, it was just like, no
previous aid
blankets.
station, the aid station prior to Sedona, of the aid stations that I saw you guys at, that was the one you looked the roughest at. The steer pads.
Oh, right, before that.
Yeah.
Well, and then we had such a rough go getting to Sedona, too, not just because of the tired, but supposedly the flags were messed with at the end of that, too. The course markings were
I remember I had my phone out. I ended up being a
taken
navigator.
by tourists or whatever.
Yeah, we were following other people because I was so tired that I was having trouble making my eyes work. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter because all we have to do is get to this aid station. So we're in this urban trail that goes around a creek. Yeah. And there's all of these side trails because it's the kind of thing kids make, which we have here in Shaker Heights. It's great, but someone had supposedly taken the flags. So
and
I got my phone out.
I saw that section, of course, and it was like a very much in the center of Sedona. A lot of tourists, a lot of hikers.
The other trouble as well.
Somebody probably thought they were doing a favor.
Here's the thing. Not necessarily. The reflectors on those flags didn't reflect. Like, they did technically, but they only reflected when you were about 20 feet off, so you couldn't spot them from far away. And your headlamp doesn't show a colored flag that's more than 20 or 30 feet away. I had mine on 400 lumens, and you can't see those little plastic flags in the dark. So it might be marked with one every, 100 feet, which, if they're actually properly reflective, is enough, and if it's daylight and they're hot pink, is enough. But in the dark, when they don't reflect...
Well, both things were going on, because actually earlier, before we got to the Sedona area, but while we were on that segment, it's like you're kind of on this, more, dirt road for a while, and then there's a part where it turns off on this little path, and it's just marked by this, one tiny little flag off to the side, so we actually missed that turn. And we got pretty bad off course. Do you remember that? When we got...
I don't think we got very far.
Nah, what? No,
I remember pulling my phone out.
You remember that first time when we had to pull our phones out and we were going in zigzags for a while? Because we did follow. That's good. And your phone said it would show you going one way, but then the arrow would spin around.
Oh, I forgot about that. We were totally lost.
Yeah. And then those other people passed it too, because when we finally followed when finally the phone started working, we saw the headlights coming. and you were like, well, let's make sure they didn't miss it. And the turn was actually, they did miss it. We came up just in time to be like, no, we're going the wrong way. You guys need to go the wrong way too. But that turn, it was surprising that there wouldn't be more signage there, because it's like you're on a main road and it's a little side path, and it's like these flags really weren't very reflective in the dark, so because they missed it too, so it wasn't just us.
There were other people wandering that area. You could see like people in different spots. So there's multiple Jeep roads, but there's also creek washes, and you can't tell the two because they're low maintenance. Yeah. So you've got, it's not like there's trail A and trail B turn, and you missed the turn, so just come back to it. When you try to come back to it, since you didn't look behind you, there's multiple trails coming in, and you don't know which one you came off of. So we ended up bushwhacking our way back.
So, this all happened, and like you said, you saw us at Deer Pass, right?
Yeah,
before that.
This is after
I remember telling you, like, you said, hey, how are you? And I said, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired. If she won't sleep at Sedona, she's going to have to go on without me. But there was kind of that, it was known amongst the runners at that point that you kind of had to make it to Sedona to be in any kind of good position to continue ahead. Like, if you didn't make it to Sedona that night, you're probably not going to hit the cutoffs. So we had no choice. Not to mention there wasn't really anywhere to sleep at Deer Pass or anything anyway. That wouldn't have been comfortable. So it's like we had no choice but to press on. But yeah, I mean, I was falling asleep on my feet for the beginning of that segment. That's when it's like I'm like sleepwalking, and I'm like, I don't know. I hadn't seen Dances with Wolves, the movie, in like 20 years, but like I saw a fence, and somehow I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's not the fort. And Lee's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's okay. It's okay.
But we did remember.
They're not shooting at us. And then she looked at me and she's like, you are about to collapse. Let's lay down for a minute. And we laid down. And I was like, my feet are in the road. And she's like, no, they're not. This is not road.
She argues. She keeps arguing, and she's not awake. She's like, my feet are in the road. They're going to get squished. I'm like, no, your feet are out of the road.
Like,
your feet are in the road. You're going to be squished to death. No, baby, there's no cars. It's 3 a.m. and it's not a road.
And that was one of those cases that we literally just took a 10-minute nap. It was 10 minutes, but like waking up from it, like it's amazing like what a 10-minute nap will do. But yeah, then we went into the section of getting lost, and it just felt like so much happened in that segment. I don't remember the exact mileage of that segment, but
that's what it was.
Getting to Sedona was just
we got lost from there, and then you come out on these roads and you're like, okay, good, we're going into Sedona, and then it goes into those little creek trails which you can't find because you go up the road and then you have to go. We found a bunch of lost people on the road because they're trying to find the way in the trails,
because it's a weird little parking lot cut in.
You could just go up and come down a road, but it's parking lot cut in, and the flag isn't reflective, so you have to pull out your phone, trust the GPX, and just so most of us were navigating.
But then markers were missing.
Even when I was doing the course preview, I was using the GPX,
which is fine. I mean, they required you to have it.
But people were like calling the number on their bibs and stuff when we got up there. So it was lost. That level of like that many people not knowing.
Well, and there were sections of road in Sedona when I was looking at the GPX and walking in, going, they're making them walk this road. Because there's no sidewalk. It's a narrow road where people are driving like 50 miles an hour. If they're driving,
it was too late. There was no traffic when we were there. There were no cars.
And I'm glad you were there with no traffic. Although that took me there at night rather than when it's like beautiful.
It was it was
like the most beautiful part of the
course. That's what's funny is because the whole reason I wanted to run the race was because of like the Sedona pictures, and I've been to Sedona. Well, not the whole reason, but like it was one of the very appealing reasons is I've been to Sedona before, and I didn't really get to hike the trails. Because I was with family, and it was something that I wanted to be able to do.
The name Cocodona, it's like a portmanteau, right? The Cocodona Forest and Sedona.
Right.
And you don't hit Sedona until you're like 140 miles
right,
in.
So I pictured, honestly, as naive as I am, I pictured this whole race just looking like Sedona. I was like, oh, it's going to be beautiful. And no, like you have like maybe less than 50 miles of beautiful, and then like, then rock bed, fire roads. And other people think differently. Like other people will tell you it's a beautiful course. I didn't think it was a particularly pretty course. It wasn't motivating to us.
There are some 50Ks in Sedona for other people who are maybe interested in running an ultra in Sedona, where it's beautiful Sedona
right, Sedona's pretty.
It's very pretty. There's 50K.
We did get to see Sedona going out of Sedona.
Granite
we just didn't get to see Sedona going. Cool. Yeah, there were some beautiful parts. It was such a small fraction of the whole 250 miles. But that's to our taste. We like green. We like waterfalls. We like, the temperate forest kind of thing.
I liked the desert the first day.
So
Because it was
don't go
different.
chasing waterfalls.
No, I enjoyed the desert the first day because it's so different from
So
home,
different.
and it's so different than what I'm used to. So I did enjoy that, but definitely there were a good 20 or 30 miles where you're going past tract homes that are being built. You know, the kind of developments that have a homeowners association, and you're just going next to a view of those for miles.
Yeah,
now, it does not help that that's when we were at our most tired. And it was direct
I was
sun.
singing,
like, had that been
Little
night,
Boxes
we might
by
have been-
Melvina Reynolds, which is one of my favorite like songs.
We
like,
were singing that.
It's deep,
They're
deep
made out of
stuff. But yeah,
ticky-tacky.
it was Ticky Tacky Houses, a lot of Ticky Tacky Houses. So I was
But people enjoy those.
singing Little Boxes. But yeah, you could tell that
There
they
was
had
the cool town
Hoa,
before Jerome.
You know,
What
all
was the
of
name
that.
of the town before Jerome? Because that was cool.
The one with the little like caboose cafe.
Yeah,
I
Oh,
keep
was it
forgetting.
after Jerome's
I think it was
Cottonwood?
after. It was after
There's
Jerome.
Cottonwood.
Cottonwood.
Because Dead
No,
Horse
but there was
Ranch
one up above.
Cottonwood.
What was the little tiny thing above Jerome? Or
That
is
was
Jerome?
Jerome.
That is
That
Jerome.
That is
Okay.
Yeah, that is Jerome. It's just that the
I
aid
hallucinated
station.
a different town.
No, that is
You
Jerome. But then
hallucinated the town
then you go
above
down
Jerome,
like
which
the
is-
hill to the aid stations.
Yeah, that was a cool
But yeah,
spot.
Jerome.
Yeah,
Yeah, those
Jerome's
were
cool
cool little
spot, yeah.
towns. But yeah, definitely didn't appreciate the cookie cutter like
The canyon
Yeah.
was super beautiful
fancy
for the first
homeowners
half of the
association neighborhoods.
climb.
Those
The
were
canyon,
good.
the canyon up from the river crossing was amazing for the first half of the climb.
So did you guys see at Tootsie Goot when, like after Jerome you do run past the Tootsie Goot, which is like an ancient Native
Yes.
American dwelling. It was really cool.
Yeah, we did see that. You remember
Okay.
there were tourists up on it,
yeah.
and then we went up around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I remember
Yeah,
reading the
so that
sign
was
for
cool.
that.
Yeah.
There are probably things we really need to take our little cards and like go through what we do and don't remember because
Yeah.
I didn't
You
remember
said
until
that
you
and you're
brought
like,
it up.
is that real? Yes, that was real.
Until you brought up the being lost
Yeah.
and going in those loops on the way
Yeah.
to Sedona. Because I only remember the being lost. Now I remember it, but the being lost right before we went in. Because that actually woke me up enough. Like I was having trouble seeing. And I got so aggravated because the people we were following, it was this guy. And he was like, well, I've done this before. I know. And then he was clearly off course. I'm like, he's wrong. I have to figure this out. Everyone is following him, but he's wrong. And he was wrong. And I figured it out. And they're like, where are they going? I'm like, you guys can follow me or not. I'm going to the aid station. And I found because I got my phone out and I found it.
Which they tell you it is mandatory for you to have the course on your
And
phone.
I
but
do anyway, and when it's not
also-
mandatory, it's a
but-
good idea.
You
There
didn't
were
expect
parts
to rely on it.
I
so
didn't
much.
expect that you would have to I feel like if you didn't have a phone or somebody to follow who had a phone, that it would have been really hard for you to stay
You might
on
have added
course at
30
that
extra
certain.
miles.
Like
Like
Christine.
Well, like Christine. Oh,
She's
bless her.
tough. Oh, my Lord.
Christine.
Yeah, if you're
She's a tough
if you're
woman.
not gonna use the technology, you better be really strong.
And she very well might have
She's
added
really
on
strong.
it. Because just the one time she went off course, she added 7 miles, and I think she went off course at least 5 times. So
Yeah.
I don't even want to know how much
And that's like
mileage.
physically and
how
like
much mileage
emotionally strong that she could come into the aid
No.
station and be like, "Hey, I just added 17
No, if
extra
I-
miles. Whoops."
She had some moments.
I
later.
would have broke
I'm sure.
down.
But, yeah.
Oh my god!
We
if
tried to get her to
added
stay
that
with
kind
us
of
at one
mileage.
point.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good transition into our next category of things to talk about, which is psychological and emotional care. One of the things somebody asked was about imposter syndrome. You know, have you had it? Does it go away? Did you have it in relation to this race at all?
No.
I'll let you answer first because I think we're gonna have different.
Yeah,
answers.
Yeah.
I thought when I wrote this down, I was like, they're going to have different answers.
No, I felt that since pandemic, I've been slowly building back up. Like I had a couple injuries and a couple other problems going on, and the menopauses and tore a hamstring doing something dumb, and just this and that little thing, and then just some previous joint injury that then one thing and another. So I haven't felt really quite able to run the way I used to, and I'm just starting to get back there. So I don't think it's that I've aged out yet. So I'm going to be training a bit for summer, but I don't at all feel like an imposter going to Cocodona. Look at everybody that manages to do this thing. So definitely not that. But I don't think I tend to suffer from that in a running
general.
arena. It's definitely impacted me in other areas of my life, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And so I get it. I just didn't have it for this or for running. I think that to get that to go away, you have to decide that you don't want it anymore. You have to decide that you don't want to feel like that anymore, and then it's going to take some time.
Mhm.
But you have to look around you and realize, or you know what, everybody else imposter too, but look at them doing shit. So fuck it, you do it too. I mean, and nobody else is any better off.
We're all
Everyone's got it in
imposters.
something. We're all, everyone around you. Everybody's
Everyone's an
just
imposter at something.
yeah. And most of us are at most things. You just got to try your best, and you got to remember you're not alone. Everybody's got it about something, and you can get your shit done.
So what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, that's been an ongoing thing for me from the beginning. I wasn't a runner as a teenager or in my 20s. I wasn't a runner till my early 30s, really, and even then it wasn't a long distance runner. And then when I decided, Lee and I weren't together when I decided that I would likely want to do 100-miler. She was just a distance acquaintance. Now, I will say that one of the only reasons I knew they existed was because of her being a distant acquaintance on my Facebook and posting this stuff, and I'd always think, oh my God, that's so cool. So when I moved back, I had moved back to the Cleveland area, hadn't made any friends, and when I decided that 100-miler was in the cards, I did contact her and was just like, hey, this is something I'm interested in, and I'd like to get involved in the Cleveland running community, and I haven't really made any friends here, and before moving back to Florida, which I really don't want to do, I want to kind of give it a try. And then obviously we started hanging out, and one thing led to another.
It took a while.
The thing is,
and now you run 100-milers and 250.
But here's the thing: so there've been so many people who have basically insinuated that I run 100-milers because I'm with Lee.
It's actually the reverse.
And it's not like we wouldn't have ended up together had I not wanted to be doing that. Like that was kind of what sparked that initial.
So you love
that initial hanging out, and so. It's hard enough to kind of go from never being a distance runner to kind of doing this extreme thing where I got injured and decided if I could ever run again, then I want to just run. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go, do the go big or go home thing, to go from that and it feeling just kind of inadequate in that and unsure, but then having all these people say that I'm just doing it because of who my girlfriend is. But then I feel like once I did get out there and started doing 100-milers, and I did spend that year training hard, I did have some success for me. Like not that I was like podiuming, but I did get like fourth place at some of the smaller races and stuff, where it was still like having gone
somewhat legitimate getting fourth place at a 100-mile race. Which is having several
having gone from 3 miles with a distance PR of ever for a half marathon to 100-miler in a year and have that kind of progress, that started to validate me a little bit. But then, as I've been very public about, like, my training really got derailed going back to work. And Cocodona, I had not gone back to work full force when I made the decision, like, hey, I want to do that. And some of the races I was doing were kind of making me realize, like, oh, the races that I really excel at are the races with high DNF rates, the ones that people drop because it's uncomfortable. I endure and I could stick it out. And Cocodona really appealed to me. And where I was at the time that Cocodona took place last year is like I still had been kind of progressing and peaking out. And I'm not going to lie, like a little bit of it was kind of like, oh, maybe that will finally shut people up. Maybe that will set me apart from Lee. Lee's never done a 200-mile race or a 250-mile race. Maybe if I'm the one who pushes like upping the distance to this, maybe that will kind of put me in my own category and stop always being like, oh, you're doing this because of Lee, when in reality, half the races we've done were my decision. Like, it's been a mix. We suggest races to each other, but it's hardly Lee pulling me along. Like, I'm not doing it because of her. So that's
Lee didn't want to do Cocodona. Lee said
she
no.
did not want to do Cocodona.
I talked her down. I spent 2 weeks talking her down, saying it's going to be all this desert. It's going to mostly look the same. I don't want to go do a tour of Arizona. There's other 200s. And then she couldn't get it out of her head.
Now,
then the two of them coerced me into signing up.
Now, had I been able to stay on the line of progression that I was up to the point that I signed up for Cocodona almost a year ago, I feel like it would have gone much better for me. I still wouldn't have loved the course. It's not my jam as it turns out after all, but I would have done much better. But it was only like then a few months later that I started to realize my training was getting derailed and that I had the DNF at Oregon Cascades, which really impacted me emotionally. And it's been a lot of tough races since then. I've finished them. I'm really happy I finished my October races after that, even being like partly injured and such. But it's been a tough go, and vernal equinox didn't go as I planned, which was stupid to do anyway. I don't even know why I did that shit. Like, I know that wasn't going to be up my alley. And I do think some of it, too, I think some of it was not having to know how Cocodona was going to go otherwise. I think partly doing vernal equinox and then doing the 50K a week before Cocodona was, if I really look at it, was partly to protect my ego of, like, not really having to know how it would have gone without those things. Like, I have that of being like, well, I did run a 50K the week before Cocodona, so I finished back of the pack, but I ran a 50K the week before Cocodona.
We finished Cocodona.
Like, some of it's, like,
solo.
protecting yourself from having
And
to
the
know.
50K, you finished the first part of the pack.
We finished
So,
Cocodona
I don't think I was
250.
the first part. I think I was, like, middle of the pack.
I don't
It was
think
something like that.
I don't understand ego involved. We finished Cocodona
We did.
250.
We finished
Solo.
it, but so
We
anyway,
finished-
it's
we finished that
insanely
50K
hard.
like over an hour
But it
before
has
I
been-
did, and I PR'd.
well,
I guess I don't care where we finished in it. I'm
point
pretty
being-
proud
so
of getting it done.
yeah, I mean,
It's
so
hard.
it has been a rough go, and so showing up at the Cocodona start line, like it was feeling like, what the hell am I doing here? Like there was that feeling, like I'm back to the imposter syndrome after having ditched it with hard work and training. But then I think you're right. We did freaking finish it. Like we finished it off of this
No, we didn't
hellhole,
even.
like this shit year, like of barely any training at all, and we finished that race despite all the crap that we dealt with, and despite not particularly, I'm just gonna say it, like not particularly enjoying it, like not just because it's hard, like we like a hard course, we like a fun challenge, but there were a lot of things about this race specifically that aren't up our alley, and like I said, I know a lot of people will disagree. Like, a lot of people would probably
People have
like the
different
course.
alleys.
What is, they have
People have
different
different
alleys, and it's not my alley. Like, I want to run somewhere green and beautiful, and sorry to the
My
Arizonan
kink's not
folk,
your kink, but your kink is okay.
like, it was a lot
Exactly
of
that.
what I don't find scenic.
Although-
so we finished it without that stuff, I guess.
I will say one thing about the not up your alley, like, and this is individual, and it's completely okay for all styles of races to exist. In most hundreds I've been in, even if you have crew, it doesn't make a real big difference. Somebody may have a crew meeting them. People's crews help you. The volunteers help you. But overall, there's enough help that if you have well-organized drop bags and you're a person that is able to take care of yourself for the most part in hundreds, you're used to them. Unless you're switching your whole pack to gain yourself an extra 20 minutes, which most of us aren't doing that because we're not like, gonna win the elite thing, which it's cool the elite people are that fast, but for the rest of us, it's not that big a deal, so you still have this feeling of camaraderie. Like, even if you have crew and I don't, I feel like we're all in this together. So no matter who you're running next to, a little bit when people have pacers and they're just ignoring everyone because they have pacers, you're like, but for the most part, still, we're all in this together. When people are getting in RVs or when you're watching people turn in their spot locator that you're required to be wearing to the aid station so they can go sleep in someone's house in a bed.
I don't think people realize that's going
and be
on.
cooked for, then they're coming back to the course later, and you've been sleeping in the dirt under a pricker bush.
We literally slept under a pricker bush for a little bit. Like, it was the only shade we could find.
Right.
We wedged ourselves under these pricker branches.
So it's that for me, this takes away the sense of we're in this together.
It really did, and this did happen. Like,
And
a guy
I enjoy
came
that.
back. He's like, "Oh, I just got back from my sister's house." Like, and I didn't realize.
I mean,
that.
go
him. I
but-
still haven't read the runner's rules on that, but apparently that's allowed, where you could turn in your spot tracker and like go home,
We should
go to a
prepare
house, go to a hotel, go to an Airbnb,
Well,
and that's.
The whole crew
that-
thing is like, it's a different animal here for the crew
Well,
themselves.
even in the RV, but
Yeah.
But apparently that's how
tenfold if you're
200s are
going to
done.
if you're going to
Yeah.
your
Well,
sister's house or an Airbnb.
And that's 5 days of somebody spending, like, because I talked to other crew, I wasn't crew, but I talked to people who were crewing, like other runners crew. And they were like, I haven't slept all week. Because they were following their people, like, and I was like,
they're taking naps,
I was
yeah.
out, vacationing and, drinking wine and taking hikes.
Yeah.
They were, they'd go out, they'd pack up everything. They would drive to the next aid station. They'd prep the area. They'd prep the next pack for their person.
So
cook
my
a
point-
meal
my
on
point-
the
I mean,
RV.
we all
that's
know-
5 days. That's not like
so-
100 miler where they do it for
So
one day.
this is all completely okay, but
Yeah.
for me, being in a race where some of the people have that and some of the people don't, for me it took away this communal feeling of camaraderie.
Yeah.
And I also think that because there was so much of that, a lot of the volunteers knew that
Yeah.
part and didn't have a lot of experience volunteering. So it also took away the communal feeling at aid stations. Things, it did not have the same feel.
It did not.
And that's completely cool. Like, Cocodona is do your best however you can organize. You plan ahead. You read up. You research. You recruit whoever you can to help you, and then you do the best you can with that. Which is, and if you have more money or you're local and you can afford to fly people in and rent a giant RV, then you can afford to do that. The race is much more. It's easier if you have that.
It's different,
and I have some thoughts on making things much easier on anyone who has a lot of extra money to spend in terms of. But this isn't the time for the entire political discussion of that. But in terms of equity, it's like, oh well.
But it was part of the emotional.
We still did it.
What we were dealing with emotionally,
Still glad
and the
I did.
mental toughness aspect was we both felt that way, and we both felt. Had we grasped, or I think she did partly because she tried to talk me out of Cocodona. She had mentioned some of these things ahead of time, and I don't even think she fully grasped the degree that was going on.
Yeah.
But had I grasped it, this would not have been a race that I was interested in. I'm not interested in stage racing. I'm not interested in this, and I'm not knocking anybody else. Like, it's still an achievement. You're still going far, but it really is. When you have some people out there sleeping under pricker bushes and getting a 10-minute nap wherever they could get it, and then you have some people leaving the course to go to an Airbnb, or some people sleeping.
We're not all running
Airbnb.
the same race.
It's not. It doesn't feel like you're playing at the same sport, really. It feels very different to me. I'm still pulling cactus spines out of various parts of my body from some of the places that we tried to lay down, and it's like too like. I mean, we saw a tarantula, like, oh my God, I wish we would have taken a picture, but we both saw it. I know we didn't hallucinate it.
Remember the scorpion?
We're
like, well, let's sleep on the other side of the trail.
We still just like, we were so tired, we didn't let it deter us.
The worst part, the worst thing that happened,
I mean, that's what's out there.
She got completely spooked, and it was not snakes. No. Remember when the ants got on you, and they got all over your pack, and I had to search your pack? Oh, you forgot about that. That really did happen. She did.
And I didn't know it was an anthill, and I went to cover up my poop.
And the ants got all over her and her pack, and then she had to take things back off, and I'm like searching her stuff.
So I kicked the dirt to go, and I'm like, and then suddenly they attacked me.
This is like day 3 or 4.
Everything. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, she kicked an anthill, a fire anthill.
You lose your boundaries about bodily functions completely after doing. I mean, ultra running in general do that, but my boundaries have even moved like
how close
more,
I could be
like,
when you're pooping.
I mean, what can you do?
So
there's everybody like there's no place to cover, so people just started peeing like right there.
This is why we like trees,
men and women alike. It didn't matter. Like they just squat, Like what can you do? And nobody cares. Nobody cares.
The Garden of Eden out there,
or everybody's chafing too. So it's like the degree that nobody was even trying to cover up anymore. By day 3, where you're just like talking to each other with your hand down your pants, like it's totally normal as you're like lubing up. You know, I've got like a full stick down my shorts talking to some woman, and she's like, "Yeah, my feet are messed up. Oh, I had the chafing too," and I'm just like, "Yeah," like, you know, it's just it becomes so normal.
Wasn't that what to the audio? Karmell was giving a pantomime of applying lube to her nether regions.
Yes,
there was much of that.
Just to help everyone visualize.
We didn't apply it to each other, though. We kept that boundary. Everyone applied their own.
What would you tell someone to mentally prepare for this race? If they're like, I'm doing Cocodona and you can't talk them out of it.
Oh, no, go for it. I'm still glad I did it.
Yeah. So
I'm
what would you tell them to do to mentally prepare for it? Besides sleep early. Don't fall behind on your sleep.
Are we talking crude or uncrewed? Because that's a big thing too. I would say, I mean, I would warn them about what they have in store for them if they're going to be uncrewed, and if they're used to
put a Mylar sack in every drop bag.
How different those aid stations are going to be. Now they did start to get better as we got further. We got to some really good
Remember
ones.
Kelly Canyon?
Holy shit! There was this
sandwiches.
awesome woman in particular. There was one aid station where this woman was making awesome sandwiches, and just like it was after a hard stretch, and she was taking good care of us. And peaches,
Nebley Hill.
But then there was the one place where like
this
woman was just awesome. Like she was just so fun and vibrant.
Do you remember the lady
got
with
us
the spoon of
everything
ice
we
in my
needed.
bra?
And they had a tent set up for shade, and they're like, "Come on, let's get these chairs in the shade." Like those simple things is what was missing from a lot of the aid stations.
So you tell people like, be aware of the massive difference of the experience between crewed and uncrewed, and whatever they decide to do, be prepared for
and
put Mylar sacks in every drop.
If you only have 100 milers to compare it to, how different the aid station experience is going to be. Like it's you. I don't think you have,
Well, and then sleep
at a
stations
lot of
were
those aid
intense
stations, I
in
don't
the
think
sun.
a lot of them were 100-miler up runners, so
Yeah.
I don't think they had that mentality of just how much it means to have that seat in the shade.
Yeah.
Where we got to those later aid stations and they did, I don't think.
Well, and there's
early
only one.
on-
There's only one temperature
which
control
again,
sleep station.
I'm so grateful for anybody who volunteers their time. I'm just saying, going into it as a runner, you have to kind of expect the difference too. Like, I want to
Yeah.
be able to talk about my experience without insulting anybody.
Yeah.
But that was my experience, and it happened.
I think it's
But I'm
it's like two
so
different
grateful
experiences
for
when you're
people who
going
do
in,
volunteer.
It sounds like
Yeah.
if you're going to Cocodona, like, I want to finish Cocodona and I want to be self-sufficient, and that's my goal is to finish being self-sufficient. You know, you're not going to like be trying to place or anything. Then you
Yeah.
have to be prepared that you're not going to have a lot of
Yeah,
support.
Just
to be
understand that
comfort.
it's going to feel like you're very much on your own out there at times, not just because you're not getting the assistance that you're used to at aid stations, but because the other runners aren't in it with you in that same way.
Some of them are.
Some of
but
them, but they were few and far between, the uncrewed. Not many people do this uncrewed. So you have to understand that you're not going to have that, like, that same connection in the same exact way. And it does, like, it is hard when you take a nap somewhere like under a pricker bush because that's the only shade you could find, and somebody's getting out of their warm, cozy RV or whatever, their cool RV in that case.
Well, and you need to
you
prepare
have to
yourself, I
be-
think, for the sleep stations, because you're going to read about the sleep stations. These cots are not comfy, which is fine. I mean, they're
Yeah, that's
But
fine.
just to be ready.
they're Walmart cots, so like the metal comes through on one side, so you have to sleep in a very set position.
So you might
So,
want to have something.
So, which is also okay, except for Sedona St. John, which was a heated building. The buildings are not heated. Like, there were two other indoor ones, but one of them was supposed to be heated, but it was about,
Well,
I woke up shivering repeatedly and gave up. That was the one that was, remember, they told us, go over to that building, and here's your assigned bed. Well, you go over there and someone's sleeping in it because they actually weren't keeping track. And even when I came back over, I was like, oh no, those beds are taken. I just left there. This is a room that has an empty bed. And the volunteer's like, no, the chart. And I'm like, no, I just walked out of the building, and you had to walk way over there, so you can't.
Which
And
is a
most
lot to
places
manage
sleep
when
is
you're
near-
super sleep deprived too.
Yeah,
and
so
you're
you
like,
walk in and there's nowhere to sleep. You're like, I'm just going to lie on the carpet in the hallway. But then it was like, but the building wasn't heated, and people's crews were keeping the door open. So then it was cold inside that building. And then a couple of the other ones are cots in tents, but the tents are in direct
so it depends
sunlight.
when you get
So like
there
Christine
because
tried to sleep in one of the tents
Yeah.
and overheated because it's a tent in direct sun at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Which is when you want to sleep,
Yeah.
except it's really
versus
hot.
the tent we got to at Munns?
Months.
The one
Munns.
we went,
had
the
it
aid
right.
station we had to go
That was
to
at Out
2
and Back.
times. Those tents, it was like 30 degrees that night, and we were there at night, so it was like that wasn't going to happen because again we didn't have blankets. Now you could prepare with some kind of blanket or
You'd want those
you know,
Mylar sacks in every bag.
well we
and
did
carry
we,
one, like the full
and
sack.
we actually did borrow a blanket from somebody's crew. Debbie
Irene.
was with Irene.
Irene and Debbie, yeah.
And I ended up messaging Debbie and being like, "Do you have a blanket?" Because I knew she was there. We'd seen her, and she's like, "Yeah." So she did bring us a blanket, but we were still freezing. So we went into the medic tent because it was the only place with heat. We were like, Lee just got stubborn. She was like,
I was
"No, we're
waking up
taking
in
what we
pain no
need."
matter what.
Like,
Yeah.
she's like, "We're going in there."
You have to get okay
So we
with
did.
that.
We like just slept. We like got
Although
a little nap
the
in
only
front
funnier
of
thing
the
about this
heater at the medic
you went
tent.
to get something to eat. I went
But-
into the medic tent. Didn't say anything to anyone because I was out of it. Lay on this cot with a Mylar blanket, but I just like lay down on the cot and passed out. And then I woke up, and then Karmell came in, and then I half woke up again, and then I remember falling back asleep. And the medical guy was on someone's toes, and I looked, and like he glanced at me, and I couldn't figure out sentences because I was half awake. Fell back asleep. At no point did the medical people ever take my name or bib number or ask if I was okay. They like basically just assumed since I didn't ask for anything that I was okay. And by the time that I got okay, because mostly it was delirium from not sleeping, I had water with me, and I had water that had sugar powder in it. So I was able to get my blood sugar and hydration and salt up because I had that stuff on me. So I just kept sipping it and passing out. Like I self-cared myself to okay. But it's just an interesting thing that at no point did they actually say, "Do you need anything?" At no point. Then that was the one where the runner was like, "How did you guys?" But that's like the other aid station where I was like, "I need some coffee," and the guy ignored me. So I eventually went and got my own coffee. And then the other volunteer was like, "What are you doing behind the aid station tent?" I'm like, "I'm getting coffee and something to eat." "You're supposed to ask him at the front." I'm like, I tried that. Like I think it was a volunteer shift change.
Yeah.
Because you remember Christine asking the guy for electrolyte drink, and he goes, "Oh, I'm done volunteering right now. I'm off shift." and walked away from her. And,
Right.
like there was none
It
mixed
was
up when we're
crazy.
getting ready to leave.
Like,
stuff like that
I've
happens.
never seen anything quite like that. And
Like, I get your volunteering,
it was,
but, like,
it was just
holy
a little
shit.
bit like sometimes trying to get what you needed was a little hard. So
Well, and I think people, like, just to give my perspective on people expecting you to have really attentive crew, like right at the beginning, you guys got your spot trackers, and the spot trackers weren't staying on, so we had to get some tape to put
Tape
the pot
them on.
and so people are looking at me like, Amy, do you have tape for them? And I'm like, I don't have tape for them. I don't have anything for them. And they're like, right,
You
the race
expect the race to have the trackers
right.
actually
What kind of
set to
crew
say
are
on
you? What kind of, they're looking like she doesn't have tape. And they're like, okay, we're going to get Amy some tape, and Amy's going to bring you tape at the next aid station that crew can be at. And I'm like, the next aid station that crew's at is Whiskey Row. They're going to be there at like 1 a.m. My hotel's an hour away. I'm not bringing them tape at 1 a.m, an hour away from my hotel.
Like, she's not our crew.
I'm not their crew.
and I don't think we've been very clear necessarily in this podcast. I think it's because we assume it's just known. We don't want to be crewed. We don't use crew and pacers. But
We'd rather
But
race
they
with
weren't looking at me like I was going to bring them tape, but other people were.
And so people are like probably kind of like to some degree probably like, well, why are you complaining if you don't use crew or pacers?
We're just telling you our experience.
Our paying the registration, we expect certain accommodations to be available. That's the difference between doing something completely self-supported or not. And if I pay $1,500 registration, then I expect to get a little bit of like what I need at the aid
So
stations.
that's something to mentally prepare yourself. If you want to do Cocodona uncrewed, don't think that like that $1,500 translates to a little bit of luxury.
No, and it's not even luxury. You know, it's the basic aid stations, like
you're tired.
The average aid station treatment at your average 100-miler is kind of what I expected for my $1,500. That's kind of what I'm saying. But I don't think that's
and if you
necessarily
go
where
with
that
your
goes.
friends, if you travel with them, and you're not crewing them, expect a whole lot of guilt trips from other people. That first like I went out to breakfast with people, and they're like, "So you're not going to help them at all?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to show up with a camera at random aid stations. They don't know which ones I'm going to be at. I'm just going to show up. Hopefully they're going to be hallucinating, and I'm going to answer some stupid questions." And they're like, "So, like, you don't have, like, stuff in the car for them? Yeah, you can't just, like, maybe bring them some tape at 1 a.m? I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything for them.
No, actually, I messaged you before I messaged Debbie to ask if you could bring something, and you were like, "I'm drunk."
I didn't feel bad about that. I'm sitting like on my phone, drinking wine in a hot tub because I'm on vacation. And Karmell's like, she's messaging me already. She's like, "I feel terrible even asking." She's like, "But is there any way you could get a blanket to Munz?" And Munz was like a 40-minute drive from my campground, so it wasn't like super far away. But I was
not after wine in a hot tub.
I'm like, I'm drinking wine. So, nope. Like any other, but like if you got to me like 2 glasses ago.
Actually, given
she was not our crew though, and
But
there wasn't that
and later I
expectation.
thought about it. I was like, I guess if I had stopped drinking wine, I probably could have like sobered up in time to bring them a blanket.
It was just that level of
That's part of the adventure.
But yeah, part of the adventure.
Ultimately, I'm super glad we had this adventure, and it's cool that this race exists, and it's crazy hard, but also I'm almost glad that we didn't put more into training, because I don't think we could have done a ton better uncrewed and with knowing, like, we didn't know enough. Like, the reason that the next one will go better is because I think that, like, I can tell you all kinds of things about how to run your first 100, but at the end of the day, you gotta go do it. I don't care what kind of imposter you think you are or what you think you deserve. You need to register and you need to go and try your best to follow the advice. But there is shit that you have to learn by doing. And there's shit that we learned by doing. And sometimes you DNF, and sometimes you just have misery, but there's time to hike it out. And so you're just like, Well, but we hiked it out. We learned everything we needed to learn for going forward.
That's good, because that's my next question.
Well, actually, before that, you reminded me of something really important that I wanted to go back to because of the way I left it about imposter syndrome. How I said, like, we did finish. And if you're a runner, if you run, you're a runner. If you run long distances, you're an ultra runner. A DNF at Cocodona would not have made me an imposter. A DNF at Cocodona didn't make anybody else an imposter. Some races don't go as well as others. So I did want to clarify that, since I said that was kind of
Sometimes you're
well,
fetal
we
in
did
the
finish.
shower.
Like it doesn't matter. It's easy to get in your head about that, where you think, oh, I DNF'd, or I had these couple of bad races.
That's what I'm gonna really feel like a runner when I have a DNF.
There you go. I mean,
Accurate.
there's
you haven't DNF'd yet. You're not a serious ultra.
there's an ebb and
You know
flow.
what, Amy? If you sign up for 100 miler, you'll have a better chance
I
of
could
getting your first
DNF
DNF.
at 30 miles.
No, you have to try though. Other doesn't count.
Yeah, there's an ebb and flow to training, and it kind of parallels life. There's ups and downs, and people have said you're not always going to be trained up to your most. I think you were telling me about Sabrina Stanley's post, where she opened up a little bit about that at one point.
Having
about,
something go real sideways in bed. It happens.
Or it being up in weight and not always her ideal training weight or whatever.
Oh,
it was.
yeah. She posted about
which
that.
is
She
cool
posted
for
about that a
an
couple
elite
times.
runner to
She's
come out
not
and talk about that.
scrawny.
DNFs don't
She's strong.
invalidate you. And had I not successed at Cocodona, that would have been reasonable, given that this was an off training year for me. And one off training year doesn't invalidate everything I've done as a runner, and it doesn't invalidate everything I'm going to do ahead. So I just did want to clarify that because of how I left that.
I've DNF'd.
So what did you learn?
Several things.
Okay, so the last section I want to cover in this podcast is the what's next in longer distance. You mentioned Swiss Peaks. Swiss Peaks.
No, Fat Dog 120's next.
That's only 120 miles. Let's talk about Swiss Peaks.
That's a warm up.
It's a warm up. Because Fat Dog is it's 120, so it's still very similar to your hundreds in terms of, and you've done lots of those.
Yeah, it's
right?
just a really hard 100.
Right. So I want to talk about Swiss Peaks because that's more similar to Cocodona in terms of strategy and everything.
We got to start doing
So-
more researches. We got to plan ahead for that.
What did you
Other
learn
things.
from Cocodona that you're going to carry to Swiss Peaks? We talked
Yeah, we're
about
gonna
sleep.
Resting sooner.
And we're dealing with totally different weather too, but
Yeah.
so it's
Swiss Alps.
at no point do I expect there's going to be like heat beating down on us, but
Not prolonged like
definitely we need to have like more snack options
Mhm.
on the go. Like it cannot be 5 or 6 days of gels.
Mhm.
Like
Gels and
that.
potatoes.
Still
Yeah.
carrying emergency ones though.
yeah, so a variety of snacks. We know we're going to have our layers on us. Swiss Peaks has like the sleep stations with blankets and stuff. Like they are a little bit more efficient there with their.
Is
They're
crew
light
even
bases.
allowed at Swiss Peaks?
I don't.
I do
You
think
yeah,
so,
you can
right?
people are allowed to meet you in the life base areas.
I
But
just imagine
you
just in
can't-
general
you
with
can't
Europe
go-
being less car centric.
you-
Right, it's
you-
not going to
you-
be like
you-
RVs and
people-
sprinter
right.
vans.
people they have shuttles and people can come meet you at those villages, but you can't go and I've been in many hundreds that's where you can't go get in a vehicle.
Right.
You're not allowed to go get inside a vehicle. So that the base is on course, but you cannot go to a hotel room. You cannot go
So
get
Swiss
in a
Peaks,
vehicle.
you have to stay
You're
on
not allowed
course
to be
and you
inside a
have to
vehicle.
use their facilities. So there's a bit more of like
But you'd be
You're
allowed.
all
You'd
doing
be
the same
allowed to
thing.
be at one of their life bases, which is
Right.
there where your drop bag
so
is and
I
everything.
could be there with a camera.
You could.
Yeah, and you could help someone charge their phone or rub their shoulders or something, but you can't. Yeah, you can't be getting in vehicles or anything. But they actually have. I've seen pictures of theirs. We watched videos of a guy going through, and they've got a room that has a whole full table with hot meals, and they've got a couple rooms that have beds in them that you can go sleep in. I think they want you to have
And you're going to use
because
those
COVID.
beds.
Yeah,
We're gonna use
Okay,
those beds.
so yeah, I remember because we talked about
earlier.
Cocodona.
now they're real
I
simple
asked you
plastic
several
mattress,
times before
but-
this podcast, before you ran Cocodona, so what's your sleep strategy? And I heard you say, we're just not going to sleep. We're just going to we're going to sleep on our feet. It's going to be fun. And it does sound that maybe you learned your lesson a little.
Oh no,
Yeah.
we learned our
I'm not
lesson.
going to say
Yeah.
I told you
A little?
so, but
About that and about you questioned our proposed pace
I
as
did
well,
question
and you
your
were
proposed
correct
pace.
about that too. It was too fast for having
you
that
got-
many days ahead.
so going out Swiss Peaks, you're going to follow the
I
advice
actually
I
think-
tried to give you
I
of
actually
going a
think-
little slower, going out and sleeping earlier.
I think in better shape, that pace would have been fine, and we've been training about double the volume we have been.
Well, but we haven't.
But
so,
we haven't.
so there's that.
I also think that because that pace would have then been a lower effort, we would have been more able to eat more food at that pace. Now, the pace is going to be way slower at Swiss Peaks due to the climbing, so we're going to have to dial back effort and take more snack breaks. I do think that part of the tiredness is because people have to sleep, but that also we got more behind on calories. When you look at people doing I know we're not the special forces carrying the boats, but when you look at people doing that style training, their calories are upped more than we upped our calories. We ate more than in a normal day, but we were not putting in enough calories. So we need to figure out how to just hammer the calories.
Slow down, eat
Right.
more, sleep earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's gonna be lie down flat and hold still for a half hour. Whether you're gonna sleep or not, we're gonna lie down, close our eyes, and be quiet for a half hour. Hit the light base, and if that results in an hour's sleep, cool. And if it results in a half hour of lying there with your eyes closed, being totally relaxed, cool. That still lets your body reset and cool off. Like when you're on go and all the muscles are contracting, you just don't process stuff well. So it's still gonna be a let things calm down and get processed.
Yeah. And I think the course will be really I think emotionally it's just going to be so much better. First off, again, it's going to be more that we're all in it together kind of thing. Everybody's doing more of the same thing.
Yeah.
But the course, Switzerland's beautiful. I've been there 2 times. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been. That's up our alley as far as the kind of like climate and course we like. So I think that's just going to be so energizing, just as far as just constant like, wow, look at these. These stunning views, which is going to help. It will. Like nighttime is going to be cold, and I think you do have to carry a bivvy, and we have.
You have to carry a sat.
We've practiced a couple of techniques for trying to keep warm. Like when we were when Lee was number 1 on the hard rock wait list, and we went and run around in Colorado, we got to have like the little experience of testing out like our little her little shelter, when the hailstorm came in out of nowhere and stuff. So. We are aware that like some pretty severe weather could roll in, and
knowing
the
that
temperatures
we
could
can
drop
stick together
pretty
is a huge
quickly.
edge, because actually 2 bodies stay
well,
warm.
and that's a huge thing too. Is that like I guess we haven't really touched on is that we were able to do this together as a couple.
It was a good couple retreat.
With no fighting whatsoever, which was awesome, and I figured we wouldn't going into it because we have that kind of relationship where we don't fight, we discuss things.
We almost argued.
Work through
She
them.
didn't want to let the aid station people let her sleep on. I wanted her to sleep on the floor of the aid station. The aid station people didn't want her to. I wanted her to ignore their requests and just sleep on the floor. She was tired.
Yeah, she was kind of like, screw them. Because the guy told me I was in the way when I tried.
And Karmell's much more like, I don't want to be in anybody's way.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Dude was
exactly what I did.
Overtly stoned out of his head.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. Just
so are you
there.
adding anything to your training for Swiss Peaks?
Oh, absolutely. We actually have
6-minute legs
decided,
every day.
No, we have decided to be sensible. We were on the race stacking thing while I had my terrible work schedule, but I have no longer my terrible work schedule.
We're going to train all summer.
I had briefly mentioned doing like Mohican in June, but we have completely scrapped that. Fat Dog was a rollover from last year. Otherwise, that wouldn't even be in the books as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's time to stop with the race stacking and get back to some solid training. So this summer is we're going to be following our plan essentially that the group has, but with slightly more volume.
More volume.
But we'll post about what we're doing for interested
right,
people.
6-minute legs
but
every day.
I think we're going to start doing 6-minute legs every single day, which did not start today, but still could.
All right. So, what month is Swiss Peaks in?
September.
It's the very
the end of
last
August,
weekend of August, first weekend of September.
Yeah, it goes into September. Which
really, I like that Fat Dog's there because I kind of want to run something. I'm glad that we have 2 months of nothing, but I actually would like to have kind of a tune-up.
Just to remember what it's like to race?
Yeah. And just to be out there with the packs and everything, because
as
I pointed out,
you mentioned you hadn't worn are you going to wear those same packs?
Yeah.
Those are good packs.
There's going to be a lot of long runs with them. We need to make sure all our
I think we need to load them up. And that's a training difference too. Is that for for our long runs, I'll be loading mine up with like 2 or 3 liters of water.
Yeah.
Because that was huge for Cocodona. Right. Like those things need to be weighted because that was like a shock to the system for Cocodona. Was being like, these are heavy.
Yeah.
Like that many gels, that much water.
Are they going to be heavier for Swiss Peaks because of the bivvies?
Yes. No, the bivvy. No, that doesn't weigh much. That's not what makes them heavy. But we do have to have
full layers,
gear, one more layer,
and the gaps. Even though it's not going to be as hot, the gaps are longer, so we're still going to need a lot of water. But then there's water you could filter too. I think.
And the altitude of Swiss Peaks, I imagine, is going to be a thing.
No. The high point of Swiss Peaks is only about 500 feet higher than the high point of Cocodona. Cocodona gets over 9,000.
Okay.
Swiss Peaks averages higher, but it goes up and down a lot. So the average is a little higher, but not much, and it still doesn't go over 10, and most of it's under 9.
Okay.
And when you come up to the high points, you come up, you're high, and you go straight back down. So like it's not like you're high up on a desert plateau all day doing this. level, I guess I should describe. You're not coming up onto a plateau and staying at a high altitude. You're coming straight up the mountain and then straight back down to back to low again.
Yeah.
So a whole lot of it is
So
more
Swiss
around
Peaks are
5,000 and
mountains,
6,000.
not plateaus. Arizona has plateaus.
But it will average higher, but not much, and we're not dealing with 11 and 12,000 above sea level. None of that.
I know we're getting late on the time too, but one of the questions somebody in the group wanted to address, I don't know if it ever made it on your sheet or not, but was if we ever thought about DNFing.
Yes, I did have a couple questions here, and that was one of them.
And that kind of ties in with mental toughness, which I'm not sure that we answered thoroughly. So I did really kind of want to swing back around to that really quick before we wrap up. It was actually, was it called Munns Park? Is that the aid station?
Yes.
So that's the aid station we hit 2 times.
That's the one that guy was like, I can't believe you guys got out of that aid station.
Right.
I didn't think you guys were going to get up.
There was a really, really hard stretch, and then there was like a good aid station, but everybody knew they had to get to Munns Park, so we actually didn't stay at the good aid station that long. We kind of had to get out of there. It was like everybody knew, like, you got to keep moving from here. So we didn't have a lot of time to refresh at the good aid station, and then we got to Munns Park, and it was like, okay, well, that's where the sleep station's going to be, and that's where it was the tent, and it was going to be cold out, and we got there when it was dark. So it was like coming into that aid station, I was like, gosh, I really hope this is going to have everything we need. I hope we have a place to sleep. Like, I hope we could get refreshed here because we have this 16-mile out and back, and then we come back here again. So we really need this aid station to be good. And that's when we realized, oh, it's a cot and a tent. It's so cold out. And again, this is our fault. We should have known. Like, we could have looked that up ahead of time. It's just, I assumed there would be probably some seats with a heater or whatever too, you know? And there wasn't.
I literally sleep sitting up in those captain's chairs all the time.
So we went on the 16-mile out and back, and that's where Lee was talking about how she was getting on her hands and knees, like her feet were hurting, she was falling asleep. Like, that was a hard stretch for us. And so we got back to Munns Park the second time, and that's when we went in the medic tent, where Lee was just like, screw it, there's heat in there, we're going in there. And I'm like, we can't do that. And she's like, watch me, you know. She just went in there. We gotta get better with you in front of the heater. But yeah, she was all about like, we paid our
more of like a healthy sense of entitlement.
Yeah, she was like, we paid our damn $1,500, you know. So she went in there. So we like napped on this cot together, and it was terrible. I mean, we were waking up constantly. Like every time one of us fell asleep, the other one would wake up being like, ow, or I'm cold, or like whatever. It was just such a ridiculous spectacle. And I set my alarm for an hour before the cutoff, right? Because we're like pushing the cutoff that you had to leave there by. And my alarm goes off, and I'm like, I said to Lee, like, her foot had been bothering her coming in there. And so I said to Lee, like, we have to go, the cutoff. And she kind of opened her eyes and gave me this look like, are you out of your mind? I'm done, you know? And she's like, my foot, I can't, my foot, I can't. And I'm like, crap. And I didn't even know at that point.
It was mile 187.
Like, I didn't know at that point, you know, like, if she could go on. I didn't know what the real plan was, but I was just like, she made it sound like she wasn't going to go on. So I got up, I was like, I'm going to go get us coffee, right? And so I went out, got us coffee. It was really cold outside, too. Getting coffee was an ordeal. I was, like, shaking while trying to open these coffee packets. And again, it's like, no.
The volunteers just stared.
It was just kind of like.
No one's like, oh, it was kind of an ordeal. Sit in that chair over there.
Like, it was kind of an ordeal getting the coffee, like, a little bit.
Which is okay.
Got the coffee, got back to the tent.
It's gradual.
And I handed the coffee to Lee. And, like, then I thought about how our stuff had been outside in the tent. It was so cold outside. I'd been so cold getting the coffee, and our shit had been scattered all over the tent, like from our drop bag. We just left it there and said, forget it, we'll deal with this later. And when I thought about that, it felt really overwhelming.
Yes,
to me.
we did.
Like the idea of going back out into the cold just felt so overwhelming for me.
Thank you.
And so I said, I'm having second thoughts. I don't know if I could do it. I looked at my watch. And it was like around like mile 180 or so. I think that we were at something like that. And it's like you realize
running another 70 miles is not a problem, but cleaning up my stuff is too much.
Well, no, that was part of it too, though. Then like you realize like
you gotta pack it in your pack.
How tired I am, and 60 more miles, and that just felt so long, you know. And I just said I'm having second thoughts. And she's like, I got our stuff. And I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah, when she went to get the coffee, she's getting the coffee.
She's like, I got our stuff. And she's like, the packs are packed. And, like, she handed me my pack, and it was packed. And I was like, holy crap. And it was just like, I had no idea that she went to do that while I was getting the coffee.
It seemed fair.
And then, like, I don't know, somehow we just got ourselves up and we went.
Hey, well, you can't go. Well, put your pack on. It's that way.
But I think the point of that story being, and you might not have somebody who's going to do that overwhelming task for you, but the point being is that it really wasn't that big of a task. It just feels so hard at the time. And we had a similar thing at Outlaw when it was single-digit temperatures out. And in that case, I was the one, like, our stuff was, our extra layers, we would have to walk outside to go to this other unheated cabin to get our layers. It was actually
cold at Outlaw.
And finally, like, I just got up and did it. And it's like those things that we sat at that aid station for like an hour in the case of Outlaw because that felt so impossible. And I finally did it. You'll have these little moments of these little things that just feel impossible, but
5 degrees feels impossible.
They're little tasks, and I don't know what you mentally have to do. Like, you just have to think it's not as big of a task as it seems. And
just
once
do
you
the
do
one
that
next
one thing. There was something about her having the pack packed where it really wasn't that big of a task to do that, but she did it, and it meant everything in the moment. It just made it seem like, okay, well, that's done. Let's go. Like, it was, but it's nonsense. And to go... And then it started to sink in too. Like, I didn't come 187 freaking miles to like DNF here. So I think it's just a matter of like, you know, put in the coffee, put in the calories, take that nap, and like whatever task you have to do, like it's not as big as it seems. But usually once you do those other things too, once you get in that coffee, once you let that hit, you'll start to feel better. There's no reason to ever drop until the cutoff. Like, sleep, eat, do whatever you have to do until that point, and you have
put sugar in
that
your
long.
Don't pull yourself. Make that.
You have that long to think about it. And in that case, like right when I said that, we probably had about 45 more minutes to the cutoff. We ended up getting out of that aid station a half hour before the cutoff.
But then the next one we were out of like 2 hours before cutoff, and then like we started catching back up despite ground sleep.
Because I know like Walnut Canyon had a cutoff too, and that was the last one that had any access. So that was the one I took you off-roading to come get you guys, or to come see you guys and film you. And
was she at Walnut? You were at Walnut.
I was at Walnut Canyon.
Yes, she was.
And Walnut Canyon was one of the ones that I got there right as you were getting there. Like, I got there and like Mr. America was sitting around the fire, and he was one of the runners that I kept seeing at aid stations with you guys.
Oh, the guy with the American flag.
Yeah. And I don't know what his name was, Mr. America. And I asked him, I was like, did you see Lee and Karmell? Because I just assume everyone knows each other's names out there. And he's like, I was like, the two ladies running together dressed exactly the same. He's like, I did see them. They were cuddled. Unfortunately, they were cuddled next to each other, lying on the side of the trail. I'm like, no, that's good. It's a good thing. They needed rest.
They passed out on the ground.
The cuddling's fine. They love each other. It's great. And then, like, after it is,
he didn't kick us in the foot and ask if we were okay.
Yeah, but I look up and I see like your headlights bobbing in, and you're coming running in, and that was like the best aid station I saw you guys at.
How that was our headlights?
I don't know. It has a distinctive bob. So it was like the little.
That's the one we got too
headlights.
fast, right? Is that the one we got too fast? We picked up our pace a lot. I don't remember. There was one segment that we did like really.
Yeah,
I remember
we just got there pretty fast.
There was one segment where we were just running
like,
the
fuck
whole
it, if we're not,
thing.
No, because we
got.
You did get there earlier.
If we're not going to DNF, then let's get this over with.
Yeah, after Munns Park, somehow after we made it out of there, then it really did. Like from then on, it was like we've got this.
How strong you were coming in there? I'm like, they're running at this point. So like, that was another question people had: is like, when do you run versus when do you hike, and what decided that? Was it's like, is it the terrain, or
early
is it
on
your bodies, or is it your mental state?
Early on, you run because you're an idiot, and it feels like you're holding back too much. Later on, if you can run.
Yeah, like when you're in that last 50 miles, from the time we left Munns Park, you had to make 30-minute miles. I think it was to make the end cutoff.
I mean, we were
we were
4 hours ahead of cutoff.
I felt like when we did get our asses up out of Munns Park, that was the final challenge. Once we got going out of there, it was like, we got this. Like,
my foot actually
even though you have 50 more miles, it's proportionate to the race you're doing. It was the end boost from there. Yeah. It was like, we've got this. So 30-minute miles.
Did you let the terrain decide at that point? Like, it's downhill. Run this.
I think we still we started running down the hills. Started shuffling as much as we can, and even I think fast hiking the ups a little bit. And from the point we left there, we had a really good final day. Like on the final day, I think only one person passed us the whole time.
We had to put in gels,
overtook a lot of people. Yeah. I think we had kind of saved up the energy the day or two prior willingly or unwillingly.
Do you remember like I'd have to like psych myself up and be like, okay, I gotta put this gel in, but I know it's gonna hurt my whole mouth. Washing out water. Oh, my mouth hurts.
Yeah,
Got the gel in. Like it was.
Yeah.
We were like psyching her up, and like we'd have to like sit, psych yourself up, and like stand still for a second, force the gel down because you knew it was gonna hurt. That was the funniest thing. Is like
you guys
worrying
seem
about
better
that
today than you were like a few days ago. Are you coming to terms with with this traumatic experience that was running?
This recovery was
more back
something.
in reality.
Yeah, I actually this is one of the first days that I'm starting to feel relatively normal. And it was nice to get out and run,
touch with reality
shuffle over the weekend. Like it was nice to be able to actually shuffle 15. I mean, we did it slow. We were taking down the flags, but to shuffle 15 miles a week after that,
and to stay
makes me
somewhere
feel
luxurious,
really
like troop cabin number 5.
Troop cabin number 5 is pretty fancy.
That air mattress was comfy.
Yeah, exactly. Kinda...
There was a fire.
But no, it was a tough recovery from that. The sleep deprivation, I think, was more the thing to recover from, more than any of the body stuff. It was the sleep deprivation and then the emotional aspect of that, and then even the just like it almost does feel like a PTSD, like as your eyes close, you're like I'm running, like as you wake up, I got to make the cutoffs. Like it's just this constant, like your body is this after 5 days of being in that state, your body has a hard time settling back into
I've gone backpacking
reality.
for a week, and backpacking for a week, you still feel like you're out on the trail the first morning or two you wake up. If you go backpacking for a whole week, not in a bad way, but just like you're like, oh yeah, I'm not in my tent.
Yeah,
it only takes a week. Sleep deprivation makes everything more intense.
Different. Yeah,
a lot of people that have now, we should make jokes about PTSD, especially since some of us actually have some of that from other things, but it is that thing where your brain, all of your stuff is overfiring because you're in constant physical discomfort with no sleep. So it indeed does cause you to have that kind of thing, and it's actually very healthy when something like that happens to talk it out like this, like talk about the experience, and then remember the good parts and store it in your brain so you're not like
Yeah, I mean, I don't use that term lightly. It's just the only thing I know how to relate it to. Yeah. It is your body is still having reactions to
I'm putting this out
traumatic.
there too, because I do think, like, as far as the would you tell someone to mentally prepare? Like, this is rough.
Oh yeah, especially if you're going to go if you're doing uncrewed with that amount. I mean, we got less than 5 hours of sleep, I think, for the whole race.
6 maybe.
I mean, I don't think there's a way for us to know for sure, but I definitely think as far as that we were on the lower end of the sleep spectrum than the majority of runners out there.
There was a lot of wasted time when we should have been asleep, but we were lying down. We were either in too much pain or temperatures or whatever. So there was a lot of time when we were not running. So we lost hours and hours that also left us still exhausted. So that's the other thing to account for is like, well, I'll be uncomfortable. Well, your body needs rest, but you can't sleep. So you're in a spot where you can't keep moving forward, but you also can't sleep. That is just
if you have a way of finagling it, I think the thing to do, especially if you're from like out here, because that's the other thing too, is the runners who are from out there, it was a whole different ball game for them. They were acclimated to the heat. They were running like it was nothing. For us, especially coming off of this winter, right into that.
Oh, the snow the week before?
I mean, we should have heat trained and we didn't. But the thing to do would be to sleep between noon and 3 p.m. if you could finagle your sleep schedule that way. Because I think when it cooled down at night, you want to be moving, right? That's when you want to be going the quickest to stay warm. But that heat was just like, we could barely move.
The ground is all rocks and
we were
needles.
going so slow in that heat anyway. So it was like the time to catch your sleep, if you could adjust your sleep schedule that way, if you knew in advance and could kind of plan it, and some of the time the best laid plans fall apart out there. Sometimes there's nothing you could do, but if you could finagle it that way, that would be, I think, how you would make up the most time. Well, there was sleeping during those few hours of the day when that sun is just...
There was a guy carrying like a fast pack. Remember he had the pack cover on it? And he was carrying a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag liner that was rated down like to give you an extra 30 degrees, right? And extra base layers past what we had on top of his rain jacket. And he was doing that. He would find a spot of shade. He had an actual, like, one of those, the accordion style sleep pads, you don't inflate them. He had a full size one of those. and a sleeping bag liner sack that was
he
waterproof, like
finished
a baby
around
bag.
at the same time you guys did, because people commented like on the live feed. They're like, "Look at the pack!" Like,
Yeah,
what is
so
that?
he was you're like, well, but I'll give up some to carrying the weight. Well,
Yeah.
he was carrying the weight. He was a strong hiker.
Mhm.
Like if you went out there planning to hike it and you want to be comfortable, that's what you do. You would actually, because had we both been set up like that, and it's only going to be another 5 or 6 pounds, really, because the sleep pads don't weigh that
Mhm.
much. You can get it the right kind of bivy sack that only weighs another pound. That was one of the options, and then we would have been comfortable because at that point you would use your pack as a pillow, and if we both had bivy
Not
sacks
enough
and those
trees
sleep
out
pads,
there to do hammock.
no. But if you had one of those, because
No.
you can't use an inflatable pad because the desert is all rocks and sharp
Right.
things. But actually, if we had those style, like the foam things, backpacking sleep pads, and bivy sacks, and in the day you didn't need those because it was cool enough in the shade. You could probably just put the sack kind of on top of you, because that was the other weird thing. It would be really hot, but then you'd lie in the shade and get cold.
Yeah.
But
Well,
had
sometimes
we,
it was hard to find shade depending where you were on course.
But had we had something to lie on, because then you'd find shade, but there were rocks in it. Had we had those foam pads, so that was one of the things you could plan like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and you could even if you had crew, you could even, because you can put one of those in the bungees. Like I could have bungeed that stuff to the existing pack that I had. It's got
Mhm.
loops on the bottom. You could put one of those foam things on because they don't weigh anything, and then put the other thing in the bungees and be like, look, I'm taking this from you because I'm not going to sleep now, and I'm going to jog out. When it hits this time, I'm going to lie down and go to sleep for an hour or two, and then I'm going to give this back to you at the next aid
Yeah.
station, and then I'll pick it up again past it. Like you could actually do all sorts of things. You could time it out. You even could have.
And even if you lived out there and you didn't have crew, you could even like borrow a bunch of those from friends and leave them at every drop
I
bag.
guess you could. I mean,
But you can't fly with all that.
Right. I mean, it gets
because
tricky
those
if
would
you're
have made even the
traveling.
cots would have been more comfortable with those,
Yeah.
and the aid stations that didn't have sleep stations. If you had enough of those, if you carried one of those bivy sacks, and then you had enough of those foam pads, like any of the spots we were trying to sleep that
Yeah.
we're saying didn't have anywhere to really sit or lie down, they did have, like, you could have laid down in a corner next to a wall or something if you had one of those to sleep on. It's just that you're talking about like dry dirt dust with needles in it and rocks.
Yeah.
So it's not comfortable without one of those. Like we'd try to sweep out an area.
Lee was actually sleeping on a pizza box at Walnut Canyon.
Oh, yep.
And then they brought, after they saw you sleeping on a pizza box, somebody brought over like an inflated mattress. Like, oh, we do have these.
Because insulation from the ground, yeah. Like,
I mean, that might. I don't know.
that
if
was no big
I
deal.
don't
That
know
was
if that was the
comfortable.
race persons or if that was just.
I don't know.
wasn't
Yeah, it might have just been like crew
but-
people around
yeah,
there. Like,
someone's
oh,
crew
we've
that
got
was
these,
waiting.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a
Yeah.
sleep pad. But yeah, no, they'd ordered pizza today. So she had unfolded cardboard is you put that on the ground and sleep on it.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean.
That's-
One layer of unfolded pizza boxes was so comfortable that I immediately was like,
Right.
and a
So-
little bit of like they had some kind of gas heater going.
Yeah.
Like just that was enough that I got really comfortable sleep for about 25 minutes, and it felt luxurious.
Right, so for all like we probably sound
my
like
Lord.
to some people probably sound like we're being like kind of like high maintenance.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean by like you guys
Like,
expect a little
we're-
bit of luxury.
we're
You
not-
want a heater and a pizza
We're
box.
not, yeah, a heater and a pizza.
No, that was
box.
great.
Like, yeah, no, that's like when we're sounding high maintenance. I don't think you understand.
Even
what,
just a
like
tarp,
just a
dude.
piece of cardboard. We're cool.
No,
Like-
the drop bags were sitting in like there was like dusty dirt, and your drop bag was sitting directly in it, and there were no tarps anywhere. So like it's like yeah, okay, but you got to clean your feet and
like
change
dirt
socks
with
and
rock,
shoes.
dirt with rocks.
Wearing,
in it,
so you're
with
wearing a little
rocks
pair
in
of
it.
running shorts.
Like
you're just
I'm
gonna
fine
sit.
sitting in the dirt. It's
I
the
forgot
rocks.
to
It's, like,
list
it's
on
hard.
here. A lesson
prickers.
learned is that Mushroom Secret melts in the sun.
Oh yeah, my Musher Secret liquefied in my one bag. That was interesting. It
Turns
still
out a
worked.
thing that's meant to be used by huskies in Alaska might not be formulated for the heat.
No, it was. It
Yes.
worked. It just was very runny. Had to be kind of dipped out with the fingers. It worked. We still got it on the feet.
Amy had some extra in the car at one point, so we used.
Yeah, so I
used-
did crew.
I
I
used.
did
yeah,
crew
you-
at that
look at
fire.
you. For all those people knocking you, you're treating
There
like
you
you didn't
go.
do a damn thing.
I
out
had
there.
Musher Secret in the car that was solid.
I had extra because mine was
Oh,
still
she
solid.
did. She brought me Oreos. She did. At the one
did.
she took, is the one she showed up at. She took care of us.
A little bit. I mean, I didn't bring Oreos like with me. I
she
just
just
grabbed
grabbed
ones
them.
from the aid station and like carried them over to the charity race.
Which was fantastic. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it was a hell of an experience though. Like
I'm glad I had the experience of doing
we're
it.
all
I
like
would say I
bitching.
had a great
I'm glad we
vacation.
did it.
I had a really wonderful vacation, but if you wanted to do it again with crew, I would be willing to do it.
No.
No,
We promised each other to never do that again.
No, not
answer.
because, like I said, like part of it's just
Find
don't
someone
care
else.
for the course. Like it's not enough to. It's not, and what you're sacrificing, like days out on the course,
Yeah.
days of recovery.
Yeah.
Like I have to really like
I
Switzerland.
need to enjoy
That's
it
worth
more.
it. I don't think there could be a 200 in the United States that I'd likely
I do think
want to do.
crewing this would be I think
I
a
think
different
100 is
fun
just my
experience
distance.
though. So I think if there is somebody in the project listening to this and saying, with all the misery they had, that sounds so much fun. I want to do it, but I'm going to learn it and I want crew. Let me know, because I think crewing would be fun. And
You're a
Some
crazy
people
person.
liked it.
Now,
Yeah.
I
I
just
did.
think
I'm not like running with crew. I don't think that'd be fun. But if that's somebody's thing, I think
I think I just
if
prefer
somebody wants to
hundreds.
rent
Well,
like
yeah.
a big old 4x4 like RV or like a Toyota 4Runner all fitted out for crew, I'd have fun driving that.
Well, there you go. You got Amy to
There
career
you
200.
go.
But yeah, no, this solidified for me too that my distance is 100. This is a whole other animal. It's not just like, oh, 200 plus is hard. It's not that. It's
different.
It's like it's different. Like
It's different.
even there were spots where
There's people who
like
like
we like
200s
bombing
better.
the downs. That's where we excel. And there were parts where we got to like a down and we'd want to bomb it, but it's like, oh, there's 50 miles left,
Can't
so
beat
we
the
have
feet
to
up.
march down the down. Like I don't want to do that. Like
Yeah.
I enjoy. And I don't really enjoy factoring in sleep and breaking it up that way.
But
Like
there are people who
I
do.
want like 100's that perfect distance where I could stay awake at night, not sleep. I could bomb the downs, like and do what I like to do. There's more running, not trying to factor in this
100's
hiking.
your distance, but you're still
100's the
looking forward to
distance.
Swiss Peaks.
Oh,
Yeah, for
For
something
adventure.
for something
For an adventure,
in another
different experience.
country, then yeah, I'll consider 200
see the Swiss
plus.
Alps
But
for a
I
week,
don't
yeah.
think. I think here I would have rather done a 100-miler out in Arizona and then gone hiking with you out in Arizona or at Sedona.
Yeah.
Like that would have been more fun for me than to take like 5
But we had
days
to
out
do it and find
doing
out.
parts that we didn't want to do.
You haven't learned this.
Having to not run
And
parts we
not
wanted to
everyone
run.
instinctively knows ahead of time that it's going to suck.
Well, you know what?
And-
I'm still really proud of us, and I'm actually still like because the
Yeah.
question is, but
I'm very
do
proud
I
of you
regret
guys, too.
this decision to go do this? I do not regret
No.
having done it
No.
at all.
No,
I
neither
am
do
glad that I had this experience. I'm glad I did it. No, I'm not going to go do it again. I'm glad I went to high school. I also don't want to go do that again.
Right.
There's some stuff. I'm glad I played derby. Don't want to play derby anymore. I'm glad I played rugby. Don't want to go back to it. Like some stuff you do and you're like, I'm glad I made friends with you. I want to stay friends with you.
Yeah.
Some things stick. Some things they're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad I experienced it, but that was enough.
And I do, for the record, I think it is one of the, like, if you can do a 100-miler, if you wanted to do a 200 plus, I think
You
you
can
can.
do it.
It's about the pacing and
Yeah.
the sleep management and the calorie management. Like, it's not about additional training, kind of like how we've said about, like, 100K to a 100-miler. Like, you could do it.
Yeah, you
it's,
can do it.
It's just, it's a different animal, different strategy
Oh.
to attack it. You know, unless you're elite, then it might be the same, but I can't account for that. So.
The guy who won Cocodona first year, people were saying he's like, yeah, he slept a ton in the first 30 miles.
Yeah. The first 30 miles.
He
Yeah.
slept during the first 30 miles.
Mhm.
Yeah, of last year's course. Yeah,
Yeah.
he got tired and
Wow.
went to sleep during the first 30.
Yeah.
Maybe
So-
you
Wow.
know what I think we should do is we should start working on our fall asleep technique. We need to start doing like before bed meditation visualization to fall asleep faster.
All right, we'll get on it.
All right.
Or maybe like after long runs, we should just like lie down mid long run and try to sleep.
All right. Well, I think you guys want to wrap up the podcast and either get to doing 6-minute legs or nap practice.
She's got to do
Oh.
homework.
Well, we should probably do 6-minute legs though, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm doing 6-minute
So-
legs. Then you got to do homework.
Stay tuned for 6-minute legs. All right.